Chapter 7:11. After a while, Lu Feng came to a sudden realization. This terrifying aura of desolation seemed to be a test of willpower. It was not really similar to the terrifying aura of the great wilderness totem that could obliterate everything. His willpower had been tempered by the 9 lives illusory realm back then. After experiencing so many hardships and countless tests of life and death, it could be said that his willpower had been forged into a truly peerless edge. Even the appearance of anything could no longer shake his heart. This had nothing to do with strength. It was just Lu Feng's willpower. Therefore, although the pressure generated by the aura of desolation still existed, it could no longer threaten Lu Feng. In the next moment, Lu Feng's speed began to increase. Sure enough, when he passed through the 10,000th step, the illusory realm no longer existed. Knowing this, Lu Feng no longer slowed down. In an instant, he had climbed up the stairs of 20 to 30,000 steps. Back then, it had taken Lu Feng more than 100 days to climb all the steps. However, this time, he reached the top in less than 10 minutes. The sparkling light screen still existed. Lu Feng remembered that he had experienced the last illusory realm in this light. Of course, in his opinion now, it did not seem to be an illusory realm, but a real one. That should be his memory. Because of these existences, Lu Feng had suspected that he was his reincarnation. However, after hearing the words of the shadow, Lu Feng seemed to understand that although he had a great relationship with him, he was not him. Whether I am him or not, what should come will come. My goal was to surpass my ancestor, the human monarch. Now my goal is him. They hope that I can become another him, but what I, Lu Feng, want to do is to surpass him. I was able to go from a useless mortal to the current taboo monarch and reach the peak of these taboo monarchs. In the future, I can also surpass anyone, even if it is him. Finally, Lu Feng took a step forward. The baptism of the light screen appeared once again. But this time, he passed smoothly, and there was no problem at all. In front of them was the ancient and luxurious palace. Lu Feng's heart started to palpitate slightly at this moment. When he first entered this place, there were thousands of stone platforms, and each of them had a legendary grade elixir. After experiencing the trip to the medicine god domain, Lu Feng naturally already knew the true grade of those medicinal pills. Those were legendary grade pills, there was no doubt about it. There were thousands of them. However, they were not simple legendary grade pills. There were more than 700 pills in the surroundings. They should be legendary grade 7 pills, and all of them were perfect grade 7 pills. However, although the remaining 300 or so were also at the legendary grade, they were all grade 8. Lu Feng was sure that those 300-plus pills were all grade 8 pills. In the current universe, there were only 3 people who could refine level 8 legendary pinnacle pills. They were the 3 Sacred Path alchemists. If one wanted to refine level 8 pills, one would need at least a level 8 divine object. There were at least 300 of those pills in the palace in front of them. This meant that the ancient Fang civilization had used at least 300 level 8 divine objects. Of course, this was the most basic condition. A level 8 legendary pinnacle pill could not be refined with just one divine object, and it could not be refined successfully in one try. For example, Sacred Alchemy Master Rong and the Sacred Alchemy Master of the Lu family, if they wanted to refine a level 8 legendary pinnacle pill, they would need to try twice on average to succeed. Therefore, what Lu Feng said was the most ideal situation. Moreover, every 8th grade elixir was refined using only one type of divine item. The ancient Fang civilization is really mysterious. It's really mysterious. The only word Lu Feng had in mind about the ancient Fang civilization was mysterious. The existence of Tong Tian Futu had made the ancient Fang civilization a synonym for mystery. The possession of the Pill Sutra, the horror of this place of worship, the existence of the seal crack, and the architecture of this ancient altar. All of them exuded a mysterious aura. Now, when he thought about these pills, Lu Feng felt that this civilization was full of too many unknown and mysterious auras. Level 8 Divine Objects. Although they are far from being comparable to Level 9 Divine Objects, these at least 300 Level 8 Divine Objects are absolutely shocking. If it's really according to normal thinking, then the ancient Fang civilization used at least a few thousand Level 8 Divine Objects to refine these pills. A few thousand Level 8 Divine Objects is something that even a pinnacle Overlord race would not be able to take out. However, a small ancient Fang civilization did it. Although they are powerful, they are still just a pinnacle first-rate civilization. Compared to a pinnacle Overlord race and civilization, they are far too lacking. The things that the ancient Fang civilization had now appeared were really too shocking. Therefore, Lu Feng was really getting more and more interested in this ancient Fang civilization. When I really set foot on that supreme peak, then I will use a supreme divine ability to trace back reincarnation. I will find the root of this ancient Fang civilization. This was Lu Feng's real thought at this moment. Exhaling slightly, Lu Feng finally dispelled all the anxiety in his eyes. Although he might not be able to obtain those pills by entering here, there was nothing wrong with trying. Moreover, since he had already come here, Lu Feng had no reason not to try. Therefore, Lu Feng still walked in. Surprise, this was really a surprise. At this moment, Lu Feng's eyes were filled with a kind of surprise that could not be concealed. Because this time, Lu Feng had already seen it. He saw the same scene as when he came here before. There were no more light curtains in this place. Lu Feng knew what this meant. This meant that Lu Feng had another chance to collect another item in this hall. Thousands of legendary grade pills were invaluable in the outside world, but Lu Feng did not even look at them. This was because he basically had no need for medicinal pills. These things, unless he could collect them all at once, Lu Feng would not care about them. What he really cared about were the last 3 items on the illusion crystals. Soon, Lu Feng came in front of the 3 stone platforms again. There used to be 3 items here, but after Lu Feng collected one, only 2 were left. Now, what Lu Feng wanted to do was to collect one of them. Looking at the remaining pill that was as black as a black hole, Lu Feng shook his head and finally gave up. He was sure that it was an elixir. However, Lu Feng was unable to determine what grade of elixir it was. Even though he had the fighting power of a real god, he still felt his heart palpitate when he faced the elixir. This was what Lu Feng did not like, so he did not even think of collecting this pill. This time, Lu Feng's purpose was the item on the 3rd stone platform, the metal plate of unknown use. Without the light curtain, Lu Feng was still very cautious. He did not act rashly. Like before, Lu Feng used other things to go deep inside. After confirming that there was no danger, Lu Feng finally took action and held the metal plate in his hand. At this moment, there was a burst of brilliance. In an instant, the brilliance that once covered everything appeared again. Just like in the past, everything was completely shrouded in darkness. Lu Feng was not in a hurry to look at the metal plate in his hand. At this moment, his attention was focused on the light curtain in front of him. In the past, Lu Feng did not have any ability. However, it was different now. His strength was more than 1,000,000,000 times stronger than before. This time, Lu Feng just wanted to see if he had the ability to break this light curtain. If he succeeded, then his harvest would be incomparably shocking. However, after Lu Feng looked at it for a long time, he finally gave up. In the past, he only thought that the existence of this light curtain was very powerful. However, with his current strength and experience, Lu Feng understood that this light curtain could not be described as powerful. This was simply terrifying. With such a terrifying light curtain, with his current strength, there was no way he could do anything about it. Maybe, after I reach the King Realm, I can really break this light curtain. Lu Feng could feel that the power contained in this light curtain contained the true meaning of life and death. This also meant that the creator of this light curtain should be the legendary quasi-life and death quasi-king of the ancient Fang civilization. Although Lu Feng was very conceited and was already at the peak of this realm, he had no way to deal with a virtual king. If he encountered it, he would be completely suppressed in an instant. There was no other possibility. Lu Feng also knew that although the seal here had been weakened a lot, he still had no way to break it. After all, this was a kind of fundamental gap. Although he had a heaven-defying aptitude, it was just aptitude. He was not strong enough to directly convert this aptitude into real strength. Therefore, Lu Feng could only choose to give up. At this time, he finally began to look at the metal plate in his hand. The metal plate was in an irregular shape. There was nothing special about the whole metal plate. If it had not been placed there, it would have looked like a random broken plate. However, Lu Feng understood that everything wasn't as simple as he thought it to be. Of course, the fact that it had been placed there so carefully showed the importance of this metal plate. Moreover, when Lu Feng held it in his hand, he could feel that there was something strange about this metal plate. Really, it's so sturdy. This was Lu Feng's first thought. It was really too sturdy. This was Lu Feng's second thought. Given Lu Feng's current physical strength, he could even destroy a sub-life-bearing planet with a single punch. However, when faced with this metal plate, he had no way to deal with it. At first, Lu Feng was afraid of damage, so he only used a little strength. However, later on, he even used all his strength. In the end, the metal plate was not damaged at all. Such a scene was truly a little shocking. What kind of material is this? Chapter 7:12. Lu Feng was confident that if he used all his strength, he would be able to leave a mark on the illusion crystal. However, there was nothing he could do about this metal plate. He couldn't even make a slight change to it. Lu Feng understood that the material of this metal plate was absolutely shocking. In the end, Lu Feng decided to wait until he got out before looking for someone to study the existence and material of this metal plate. After all, he was only powerful. His knowledge of external objects was really shallow. However, just as Lu Feng was about to put it away, he discovered a problem. This metal plate couldn't be stored in his independent space. This was the first time Lu Feng had encountered such a situation. It was also the first time he had heard of such a thing. A moment later, Lu Feng took out an elixir pill from his independent space and put it back. Everything had been going smoothly. However, when it came to the metal plate, it didn't work. Lu Feng finally understood that this metal plate was really strange. It couldn't be stored in his independent space. It was impossible to throw it away. Besides, Lu Feng was also very interested in this metal plate. Therefore, he took it and walked out. After walking out of the hall, Lu Feng wasn't in a hurry to leave. It was rare for him to come here. Lu Feng still had a lot of things he wanted to try. Of course, this was just a test. As he stood at the peak of the altar, Lu Feng glanced around. This time, he was still shocked by the terrifying scene beneath his feet. After all, the martial incarnations of the three divine king were really too shocking. However, Lu Feng's gaze eventually stopped in the distance. It seemed like there was a crack that connected heaven and earth. That should be the place where the seal is. I just don't know what is sealed in it. Lu Feng was really curious. After all, this object was as huge as a super life-bearing planet. What could be sealed in it would definitely be shocking. Furthermore, before him, there were already three great divine kings who came here. Lu Feng believed that he might not be able to enter the seal to see everything, but the divine king was different. The divine king could definitely enter this place. The reason for that was because he was a godly king. There should really be a dangerous place in here. Otherwise, how could the three divine king condense his martial Tao incarnations to suppress this place after coming out? If the divine king was suppressing it, then it must be something truly dangerous. However, there was still one thing that confused Lu Feng. The three divine king did not mention anything about this after his return. Furthermore, he did not seem to have any intention of stopping the human race from living here. One had to know that the three divine kings were all peerless divine kings of the humankind. They couldn't watch so many human beings living in a dangerous place that could be dangerous at any time. Could it be that the seal inside is so strong that it can't be casually broken? The seal was strong enough that it couldn't be easily broken. If that was the case, there wouldn't be any danger for the many humans living here. This was the only possibility that Lu Feng could think of. After thinking for a long time, Lu Feng felt that this was the most likely explanation. In the next moment, a faint light appeared in his eyes. Since this seal is so strong, there shouldn't be any problem for me to approach it. His heart was beating violently. Lu Feng was really tempted. After all, such a mysterious place was enough to attract any expert. If there wasn't any danger, Lu Feng really wanted to take a look. After having this thought, Lu Feng could no longer suppress it. In the next moment, he took a deep breath and finally walked down the altar. Standing at the foot of the altar, Lu Feng wasn't in a hurry to leave. After hesitating for a moment, he finally walked towards the crack. The crack was really too big. It looked like it was right in front of him, but Lu Feng walked for a long time before he finally saw the bottom of the crack. After a while, Lu Feng finally arrived before the crack. When he saw everything before him, Lu Feng was really silent. He was completely silent. He had imagined the existence of this crack and imagined it countless times. However, when he really saw it, he still fell silent. This was because Lu Feng had never imagined that the crack would actually exist like this. The crack was still a crack. Between the cracks was an endless abyss that seemed to be able to swallow everything and obliterate all living things. However, at the bottom of the crack, there was something that didn't match at all. It was a door that flickered with countless lights. Such a scene was too strange, causing Lu Feng to finally stop in his tracks. What is this? Lu Feng naturally recognized the door and knew that it was a door. However, to have such a strange door in such a place was really inconceivable. Lu Feng stood quietly in front of it and didn't act rashly. He knew that in this mysterious place, his safety couldn't be guaranteed. Although there was a bright future ahead of him, Lu Feng also knew that there was a prerequisite for all of this. He had to stay alive. Hesitation, continuous hesitation. Lu Feng focused all his power on his eyes. He tried hard to see the inside of this brilliance and see the truth. However, in the end, Lu Feng discovered that everything was in vain. He couldn't see anything at all. Lu Feng exhaled softly and took out something from the independent space. Then, he threw it directly at the sparkling door. When the object collided with the light, there was a sound that sounded like a physical collision. However, the object still existed and wasn't damaged in the slightest. At this time, Lu Feng finally relaxed a little. Finally, he decided to go over and take a look. After a few steps, he arrived in front of the door. Lu Feng quietly sized up this mysterious door. It was completely covered in light. Its width was more than 50 meters and its height was more than 100 meters. Of course, this height was terrifying. However, compared to the entire crack, it was indescribably small. It was impossible to describe what material this door was made of. Just by looking at it, Lu Feng couldn't feel anything at all. In the next moment, Lu Feng hesitated for a moment. Finally, he stretched out his arm and gently touched the door of the light screen. In an instant, a slightly cold feeling came over, making Lu Feng's heart skip a beat. This? What is this? There were many materials in the universe that could emit light. However, there had never been anything like this, which was completely made of light. The next moment, Lu Feng seemed to have thought of something, and a look of shock flashed across his eyes. Could this be the legendary substantial light? Lu Feng finally confirmed that this was the legendary substantial light after comparing it with the information he had obtained regarding the records of substantial light. Substantial light. That's something from the legends. I don't know if it even exists. I didn't expect that I would actually see it here. His face was filled with complicated emotions. Substantial light, as the name implied, was the condensation of countless light elements and laws into a substantial existence. It was different from the 5 elements, darkness, lightning, and so on. Only the existence of light could materialize. This was the characteristic of light. However, it was simply inconceivable to achieve this. What was required was not only an understanding of the law of light, but also an incomparably shocking power. Comprehending the power of light to such an extent is no less difficult than evolving the power of destruction to the extreme and condensing the great calamity of the universe. Of course, the existence of the true essence of light is far from comparable to the true essence of destruction. This is just the degree of comprehension. However, to achieve this level, I'm afraid that one would need to at least become a supreme divine king. Even a first-layer divine king would not be able to achieve this. Lu Feng was really a little shocked. In the past, he had thought that this seal should have been completed by the ancient civilization, but now it seemed that he had been wrong. After all, without the divine king or even the temporal overlord, it was impossible to achieve this. Then, what is the existence here? Lu Feng was slightly enlightened. Previously, he was puzzled. If it was just the ancient civilization's seal, how could it possibly require the 3 great divine king of the human race to seal it together? But now, it seemed that this was not as simple as he had imagined. His arm was still on the substance of light. Lu Feng's mind was filled with thoughts as he constantly considered all kinds of possibilities. However, he did not see that the metal plate in his right hand was quietly changing. After pondering for a long time, Lu Feng still had no clue. In the end, he could only give up. He looked at the door, hesitated for a moment, and then began to use his strength. Lu Feng knew that as long as it was a door, it should be able to be opened. However, no matter how much strength Lu Feng used, the light curtain did not change at all. It did not even sway in the slightest. At this moment, Lu Feng finally understood. He knew that no matter how much strength he used, it would not budge in the slightest. The existence of the substance of light is not something that the current me can shake. Although this is only the materialization of light, it is impossible to break it without the power of a peak virtual king. Besides, even if I really had that kind of strength, I would not do that. Lu Feng knew that there must be some kind of extreme danger inside. If he were to rashly break something, the consequences would not be something he could bear. Thinking of this, Lu Feng let out a long sigh. He really wanted to go in and take a look, but since there was no other way, he could only give up. Finally, Lu Feng turned around, intending to leave. However, just as Lu Feng was about to leave, he was stunned. A moment later, Lu Feng finally felt the change in his right hand. Looking at the shining metal plate in his hand, which seemed to have completely changed, Lu Feng's eyes were filled with countless rays of light. This. Chapter 7:13. At this moment, the metal plate had changed completely. Previously, it had only been a shiny metal plate. Now, however, it was filled with countless patterns. Lu Feng could vaguely see a luster flowing within these patterns. In the next moment, for safety's sake, Lu Feng released his arm and used his mind power to hold the metal plate in the air. He watched quietly as the metal plate changed continuously. After leaving Lu Feng's arm, the metal plate changed faster and faster. The patterns continued to appear and intertwine, becoming more and more complex. The divine charm flowing within these patterns became more and more terrifying and mysterious. This scene undoubtedly attracted Lu Feng's full attention. Finally, when the dazzling divine charm reached its peak, the metal plate stopped changing. In terms of shape, it was still the same as before. However, at this moment, the metal plate was no longer the same as the previously unremarkable metal plate. In the blink of an eye, one could tell that this was a divine object. A divine object that could shock the world. What exactly is this metal plate? What kind of shocking secret is it hiding? Lu Feng squinted his eyes slightly. He had long known that anything placed on the stone platform had to be a truly shocking existence. The Pill Sutra was like that, and so was the metal plate in front of him. Now, although Lu Feng didn't know what this metal plate was used for, just its hardness and the shocking divine charm it was displaying were enough to make people tremble. At this moment, Lu Feng felt that he was really small. Countless battles and the praises of billions of people had made him the belief and totem of the current younger generation. In the hearts of these young people, his existence was even more terrifying than the divine king's. However, no matter how brilliant and outstanding he was, in the face of everything, he was still a tiny existence. Faced with the countless great secrets of the universe, he could only feel his own insignificance and helplessness. However, this did not affect Lu Feng's will in the slightest. This was because he had only spent 2 years to reach this step. When he returned from the space left behind by the immortal devil era, he would definitely continue to create the Saint Mirage and continue the glorious continuation. Finally, Lu Feng reached out and held the metal plate in his hands. At this moment, a blank look appeared on Lu Feng's face. It was as if his mind was being controlled by someone else. However, this situation didn't last for long because soon, Lu Feng's consciousness had completely recovered. There was an indescribable taste at the corner of his mouth. Lu Feng took a deep breath. So that's how it is, Lu Feng finally knew what this metal plate was. This is actually a part of it. It's actually a part of this terrifying artifact. Boundless emotions surged in Lu Feng's heart. When he touched the metal plate, an indescribable information poured into his mind. This information was a description of everything. However, Lu Feng didn't know if it was because the metal plate was only a part or a small fragment, but the information Lu Feng obtained was very limited. He only knew that this metal plate was a part of this ancient artifact. With this fragment in hand, he could enter any place. The name of this artifact was Burial. Burial, what a tyrannical name. I just don't know what this artifact is for it to be buried here for such a long time. Based on this short information, this burial should have been created countless epochs ago. It might even be the immortal devil era. There was too little information on the burial shard. What Lu Feng knew was based on his own deductions. After all, the existence of this burial shard was probably even more terrifying than the great wilderness totem. To create such a shocking sacred relic, it was probably impossible to do so in an ordinary era. Back then, the great wilderness totem was truly created by fusing everything in the great wilderness era. For it, even the bones of the divine king were used. It could be said that the great wilderness totem was a special case. It was impossible to have it in the previous era and it would be the same in the future. Therefore, Lu Feng guessed that this burial should have appeared in the immortal devil era. Terrifying, shocking. I didn't expect this burial's existence to be so terrifying. After a brief sigh, Lu Feng's eyes were filled with hesitation and a flickering light. Because he already knew the use of the burial fragment, which was the transformed metal plate. Take it. Nothing can stop me inside burial. If that's the case, I'll be able to enter any place I want. Lu Feng raised his head, looking at the door made of material light. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. This material light should have been created by those invincible existences in the immortal devil era as a part of this burial. But I don't know what they built it for. However, now that I have the fragment of burial, I can go anywhere I want. If that's the case, should I enter or not? There might be shocking dangers inside. Of course, according to Lu Feng's guess, this danger should still be in a completely sealed state. After all, the three divine king didn't mention anything. This meant that there shouldn't be too much danger inside. After considering all these, Lu Feng finally decided. If that's the case, then I'll go in and take a look. After all, if I don't enter when there's such an opportunity, that's not what Lu Feng, would do. In the next moment, Lu Feng finally decided. Without any hesitation, Lu Feng finally took the burial fragment and walked towards the light door. This time, the light door didn't restrict Lu Feng. With the metal plate in hand, he easily passed through. This scene made Lu Feng slightly surprised. However, it was merely a surprise. In his heart, he had already determined that this burial existence should have been created by those terrifying existences in the immortal devil era. If that's the case, then some mysterious and shocking methods are understandable. After all, the immortal devil era was the greatest era. After passing through the door, Lu Feng felt as if he had arrived in another spacetime. Spacetime, this is really spacetime. Behind him, the light door still exists. However, at this moment, Lu Feng is standing in the endless starry sky. There is no path under his feet. However, to Lu Feng, it feels like there are paths everywhere. There is nothing in this spacetime. It's endless emptiness, as if this is an independent spacetime without any burden. Seeing this scene, Lu Feng slightly frowned. However, in the next moment, a trace of trembling radiance appeared in his eyes. This is a kind of slight shock, a kind of trembling of the soul. This aura, it can't be wrong. Indeed, it is such a shocking aura. This is the aura of the immortal devil era. In the past, Lu Feng didn't know what the aura of the immortal devil era was. However, when he used the 1 billion mortal dust 1 billion immortals and turned into an immortal, Lu Feng truly felt the aura of the immortal devil era. Clearly, the aura of this place is the aura of the immortal devil era. My guess was not wrong. This place, this burial, is really a terrifying great tool created by the immortal devil era. Since ancient times, only things that appeared in the immortal devil era could retain the aura of the immortal devil era. Even the great desolate totem, that was almost at the level of a supreme ruler, only had the desolate aura of the desolate era. This is the essence of something, it can't be changed through any method. In this endless space and time, there is the immortal aura of the immortal devil era. Then, this burial must be from the immortal devil era. Lu Feng looked around, but in the end, he couldn't find anything. This time, Lu Feng was really a little strange. Because if this was really a seal, then at the very least, there should be a sealed existence in it. However, there is nothing here, nothing at all. Could it be that I was wrong, there is no sealed existence here? This place has always been empty? Or maybe, the sealed existence here has already escaped? Thinking of this, Lu Feng's back dripped with cold sweat. However, after a moment, he banished this thought. If there is really a shocking existence sealed here that escaped, then even a worldly anomaly wouldn't be enough to describe it. Ever since Gufang's star was discovered by the divine king of the underworld, it has been inhabited by countless humans. If there was really a worldly anomaly, then the human race would have already known. But why is there nothing here? Silence and doubt, Lu Feng didn't take a step away. He just stood in the starry sky, filled with endless confusion. After a long time, he finally walked forward slowly. Step by step, step by step. Every step was done with extreme caution. His surroundings were still the same boundless starry space. Gradually, Lu Feng began to relax. His pace gradually quickened, as though he wanted to continue onward. However, just as he was about to take a step, a voice suddenly echoed in the void. Stop! At this moment, Lu Feng's pupils dilated infinitely, his body stiffening in an instant. Lu Feng didn't take the last step. He was still frozen in midair. Time seemed to come to a standstill at this moment. After an unknown amount of time, the voice in the void rang out again. Go back. Now is not the time. Lu Feng was silent, completely silent. After a short period of shock, he had gradually returned to his normal state. Lu Feng didn't say anything. He didn't even look at anything. A moment later, he turned around and walked toward the door made of light. After a few moments, he finally returned to the door. Lu Feng stopped at the last moment. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Lu Feng's figure completely disappeared into the door of light. The moment Lu Feng left, an earth-shattering change seemed to have occurred in this independent spacetime. The independent spacetime, which used to be unusually quiet and devoid of existence, actually felt fragmented at this moment. In the void, cracks crisscrossed and mottled. Through these fragmented cracks, a deep and dark world appeared. Among them, countless pillars that seemed to penetrate heaven and earth could be vaguely seen. Countless terrifying chains of unknown lengths could be seen. Finally, all the fragmented areas disappeared into nothingness. If Lu Feng were here, he would definitely be grateful to the owner of that voice. This was because the place where Lu Feng's final step was about to land had already appeared, a bottomless dark world that seemed like it could devour everything. The door of light was still flickering. Around the door of light was a prototype stone platform with a diameter of 100 meters. This stone platform was also the only thing in the entire spacetime that wasn't shrouded in darkness. At this moment, everything inside this burial item had completely appeared. It was utterly shocking. This place was infinitely vast. However, in this vast spacetime, there were billions of chains intertwined and crisscrossed. They were deeply intertwined. One end was wrapped around an incomparably huge chain, while the other end led to an endless distance. As they watched Lu Feng's figure disappear, two indescribably huge balls of light suddenly appeared in the endless darkness. One ball was filled with bright colors, while the other ball was like a deep and serene darkness. However, these two balls of light seemed to contain countless spirituality and vigor. If one took a closer look, they would discover that these weren't balls of light at all. These were actually a pair of eyes. Chapter 7:14. Along the way, Lu Feng didn't stop at all. At this moment, his heart was in a mess. The thing that Lu Feng was most worried about still happened. There really was an existence in this burial, an incomparably terrifying existence. Sealed in this incomparably shocking great artifact burial, then what is the identity of the sealed existence? Even the supreme god kings are only providing the outer seal power. Then, what kind of existence is the true seal? Vaguely, Lu Feng thought of a possibility that he didn't want to admit and didn't dare to think about. The existence of burial should belong to the primordial immortal devil era. The presence of the primordial immortal devil era aura in this space was enough to prove this. And the existence that was sealed in the primordial immortal devil era, how terrifying would that be? Could it be that the one who sealed it was an overlord of the primordial immortal devil era? Or perhaps it was directly done by that kind of invincible existence. This kind of existence was really too shocking. After experiencing countless eras, it still existed and still didn't die. In that case, it must have been an invincible existence in the past. And if such a terrifying existence really walked out of the seal, then the degree of terror would be indescribable. Currently, the strongest is the divine king of the monarch race, but he is only a second-layer time overlord. This kind of strength is even inferior to the divine king of Yellow Springs and the others. Even someone as strong as the divine king of Yellow Springs is only the outer seal power provider. If this sealed existence really walked out, then it would be a catastrophe that could turn the entire universe upside down. At this moment, Lu Feng felt the importance of strength even more. If he was comparable to a human king and had the battle prowess of a sovereign, then he wouldn't be afraid even in the face of a terrifying calamity. Thinking of this, Lu Feng was even more determined to go to the space of the primordial immortal devil era. Finally, Lu Feng completely left the center of the sacrificial area. At this moment, Lu Feng quietly floated in the air. At the last moment, he took a deep look at the huge futu before finally leaving. Lu Feng didn't intend to tell anyone about this place, because he knew that many people's greed was boundless. If they knew that some peerless terror was sealed in this place, there was no guarantee that some crazy people wouldn't do something crazy, such as releasing the peerless terror in order to obtain supreme status or power by unlocking the seal. Therefore, in Lu Feng's heart, it was only safe for him to know or wait until he was strong enough. He turned around and left. This trip to Gufang Star had only taken him 2 days, but with the time he had wasted before, the first month was almost over. Lu Feng had basically finished everything in the primordial universe. The last stop was the Lu family. When he got there, he would hand over the pills to the family and meet Yu Yu and Qing Ran one last time. Lu Feng was ready to leave. If he were to go from the primordial universe to the Aslan black hole community, it would take at least a year and a half. Lu Feng could only rely on the powerful existences of his family to bring him there. It took another 4 days for Lu Feng to finally return to his family. At this time, the first month was basically over. Sensing Lu Feng's return, many ancestors of the Lu family appeared one after another. Lu Feng had once said that when he returned, it would be the time for him to officially set off for the battlefield in the outer region. This time, Lu Feng was going there with great fanfare. In order to avoid being ambushed along the way, all the terrifying existences of the Lu family really appeared. According to the Great Ancestor, the 4 Great Ancestors would all accompany Lu Feng this time. The Federation government would also have 2 invincible powerful beings. As for the Federal University, this terrifying pinnacle power that had never participated in anything before, this time, it had also clearly stated that a great being, Void Emperor, would be coming along with divine glory. As for the others, Lu Feng did not know. Among the existences that he knew, there were 6 who had the combat power of an invincible almighty. As for the other illusionary emperor, once he entered the divine brilliance realm, he would even possess the power of a divine king. This kind of combat power was not inferior to when the ruins were opened. The Wind God Overlord is the overlord of the Wind God territory, one of the 36 territories in the outer region. His strength is among the strongest in the outer region. However, the 7 great beings accompanying me this time are not weak. Some are even stronger than the Wind God Overlord. Therefore, I should be able to fight in the outer region with peace of mind. The outer region battlefield had strict restrictions. The Divine King was unable to enter. Of course, they could still use some heaven-defying methods to enter. However, even if they used those heaven-defying treasures, it would still take a certain amount of time. At the very least, it would be impossible to do so within 3 months. Lu Feng had chosen to fight in 3 months, not only because 3 months was enough for him to complete everything, but also because he wanted to restrict the entry of the Divine King. Seeing that Lu Feng had returned, Lu Shun went up to him. "Is everything done?" Lu Feng smiled and nodded lightly. Now that everything had been done, there was really nothing left for him to worry about. When he heard this, Lu Shun turned around and spoke. "Come on in then." Following behind Lu Shun, Lu Feng walked directly into the meeting hall. The Lu family's meeting hall did not have any luxurious decorations. In terms of size, it did not stand out in any way. However, this place was a well-known sacred place in the Federation. It was for no other reason than the fact that this was the Lu clan's meeting hall. Although Lu Feng had been here many times, every time he entered this place, he would feel his heart tremble. This was a form of reverence, as this meeting hall revealed the accumulation of history. The Lu family had only existed for a little over 4,000 years. However, their foundation was really terrifying. The prestige and accumulation of this foundation was something that ancient families that had existed for tens of thousands of years or even hundreds of thousands of years couldn't compare to. This was the human King Lu family. At the moment, 500 existences were sitting quietly in the meeting hall. As he looked at them, Lu Feng's eyes flashed with a hint of turbulence. This was because he realized that he was far from being able to contend with any one of these existences. These 100 people were at least sky celestial grade existences. Furthermore, Lu Feng could sense the will of a king from the 100 existences in front of him. 100 virtual king powerhouses. At the moment, even Lu Feng was shocked by the Lu family's foundation. One had to know that these were virtual king powerhouses. Any one of them was enough to shake the entire starry sky realm. Ordinary first-rate clans might not be able to gather 100 virtual king powerhouses even if they tried their best. However, just the Lu family alone had sent 100 of them to accompany him to the battlefield outside the starry sky realm. Astonishment. This was really astonishment. As if he had seen Lu Feng's astonishment, the Grand Ancestor sitting on the main seat smiled slowly and spoke. Lu Feng, are you astonished? Lu Feng nodded his head gently. He had always been like this, admitting to whatever was on his mind. After all, this was his family. What did it matter if he was a little astonished? Upon seeing Lu Feng admit it, the surrounding virtual king powerhouses and sky celestial grade powerhouses smiled faintly. Their gazes were filled with benevolence. These people were the grand ancestors of the Lu family. They were Lu Feng's grandfather, great-grandfather, or even ancestor. In their eyes, Lu Feng was just a child. Although this child was really shocking and would soon surpass them and the others, his bloodline was still a descendant of the bloodline. However, a descendant's bloodline was still a descendant's bloodline. Nothing could change that. Upon seeing the benevolent smiles of these people, Lu Feng's heart felt warm. This feeling of being accompanied by family members was really good. The Grand Ancestor looked at Lu Feng and continued speaking. This is the foundation of the human King Lu family. As one of the peak powers of this era, the Lu family isn't afraid even if we collide head-on with some of the peak Overlord clans. As he said that, a hint of pride appeared on the Grand Ancestor's face. Indeed, with the strength of a single clan, they had the power to clash with a peak Overlord race. This was absolutely shocking. However, after thinking about it carefully, Lu Feng could be considered to have admitted it. Just the 3 primogenitors of the Lu clan were enough to strike fear into the hearts of billions of races, not to mention the terrifying existences that had appeared today. The 3 great primogenitors were the 3 great heterodox supremes. They had the combat strength of the 3 great divine kings. This kind of strength could easily sweep through the current era. If it weren't for the fact that the various peak Overlord clans had sufficient foundations, the Lu family's current strength and influence would be enough to bring the human race back to the position of the number 1 race in the universe. Lu Feng nodded gently. The Grand Ancestor glanced at Lu Feng and continued speaking. This time, when your ancestors heard that you were going to start the most terrifying battle between kings in history, except for those who couldn't show up for other reasons, everyone else appeared. They came here with the intention of accompanying you and witnessing the appearance of the eternal sacred trace. Lu Feng was the pride of the human King Lu family. Previously, the primogenitor of the Lu family had also said that if Lu Feng succeeded, the Lu family would no longer be the human King Lu family. They would completely enter the era of the imperial Lu family. For thousands of years, countless patriarchs and primogenitors had fought for this dream. However, they had all failed in the end. If they succeeded this time, their names would be forever engraved in the history of the Lu family. Although they didn't understand Lu Feng's approach, everyone understood the significance of this battle. If no one had responded to Lu Feng's previous challenge, it wouldn't have been a big deal. However, when all the monstrous geniuses in the entire universe expressed their willingness to participate, the significance of this challenge had completely changed. This had become the true final battle between kings. The victor would become the true victor of this battle and the only entity that could enter the Emperor's domain. Therefore, this was actually the final battle of the battle between kings. No one would want to miss such a glorious battle. Chapter 7:15. Looking at Lu Feng, Lu Shun asked slowly, "All right, Lu Feng, when do you plan to leave?" Lu Feng lowered his head and thought for a moment. Finally, he raised his head. 3 days later. 3 days later, we will leave for the foreign battlefield. This was the time Lu Feng calculated. He still needed to make some final preparations. After all, he had not seen Yu Qingran yet. Hearing this, the ancestors naturally did not have any objections. They nodded gently in agreement. Then, 3 days later, we will wait for you here. The moment his voice fell, the figures of the 500 patriarchs began to fade into nothingness. Eventually, all of them disappeared. In the end, only Lu Feng, Lu Shun, and the 4 great ancestors were left in the meeting hall. He did not leave. Instead, he looked at Lu Feng strangely. In the past, Lu Feng would have chosen to leave this place when the patriarchs disappeared. However, this time, Lu Feng just stood in place. He had no intention of leaving. Seeing this scene, Lu Shun finally opened his mouth and asked, "Lu Feng, why are you staying?" Lu Feng gently nodded his head, his face calm and composed. "It's like this, family head. I obtained some elixirs from a place. I will put them in the family to provide for the cultivation needs of the family's juniors and my friends." Hearing this, not only Lu Shun smiled, but the great ancestor and the other great ancestors were also full of smiles. The great ancestor's voice rang out. "Lu Feng, have you forgotten my identity?" The great ancestor's identity. The great ancestor was the Lu family's great ancestor. He was a peerless void emperor. His power was terrifying, and he was definitely an invincible existence. In fact, he was the most heaven-defying invincible existence that even the supreme god kings couldn't kill. Of course, these identities were only part of the great ancestor's identity. In the universe, the great ancestor was most famous for his other identity. It was the identity of an alchemist. Great ancestor, I know that you are one of the 3 sacred Tao alchemists, sacred alchemist Lu. With your existence, the Lu family will naturally not lack elixirs. However, this is also a token of my sincerity. In the future, I also hope that my friends can use these elixirs when they cultivate. If only the Lu family's elixirs are used, I'm afraid the other people in the family will have complaints. Hearing this, the great ancestor nodded. If Lu Feng used all the elixirs, the Lu family's elixirs would be used up. No one would say anything. However, if even Lu Feng's friends were to be used like this, then others might really be dissatisfied. Then, take them out and put them here. When your friends need these pills, I will give them to them directly. If you need it, my Lu family can still provide it. The great ancestor spoke very confidently. The Lu family was the #1 aristocratic family in the world. Its foundation was incomparably terrifying. If Lu Feng used the elixirs alone, he could use his identity as a sacred alchemist to refine enough elixirs for Lu Feng. However, after hearing this, Lu Feng revealed a strange expression. He looked at the great ancestor and then at the surrounding environment. His tone was slightly strange as he said, "Great ancestor, let's enter the treasury directly. I have more elixirs. It's not appropriate to put them here." Hearing this, a strange look appeared in the eyes of the great ancestors. They knew that Lu Feng was not a person who would speak casually. Since he said that there were not enough elixirs here, it definitely was not enough. However, according to the general volume of elixirs, it was not a big deal to put 3 million elixirs in this conference hall. Could it be that Lu Feng had more than 3 million elixirs? Lu Feng looked at their expressions and guessed what they were thinking. "Great ancestor, the number of elixirs I have is really terrifying." After hearing Lu Feng's affirmation, the great ancestor did not say anything else. He glanced at Lu Shun and nodded gently. At that moment, Lu Shun looked at Lu Feng and said, "Come with me." As soon as he said that, Lu Shun walked towards the back of the conference hall. In fact, the location of the Lu family's treasury was not a secret. Most people in the Lu family knew about it. However, even if they knew, no one dared to have any evil thoughts. This was because ordinary people could not enter the treasury. Even if they did, they would not be able to take the elixirs away. This was because the location of the Lu family's treasury was located in the Human King Palace. This was the real Human King Palace. It was a supreme sacred artifact condensed by the Human King in the past. It had great divine power that could steal the fortune of heaven and earth. The Human King had built it in hopes that his descendants could use it to avoid a great disaster. Therefore, its existence was absolutely shocking and unparalleled. Lu Feng also knew that in the Human King Palace, there was the pure land of bliss. That was where the true reserve power of the Human King Lu clan resided. It could be said that unless a few peak Overlord clans joined forces and attacked the Human King Palace with all their might, nothing unexpected would happen to the Human King Palace. This was not the first time that Lu Feng had entered the inner space of the Human King Palace. Every time he came, he would be shocked by the shocking scene. This time was no exception. After a few ups and downs, the four great ancestor, Lu Shun, and Lu Feng arrived at the Pure Lands. They followed Lu Shun and soon arrived at their destination. They were in front of a terrifying huge mountain. Lu Shun pointed at the terrifying fake mountain and said with a smile, "This is where the Lu family's treasury is located. All the treasures of the Lu family, including divine items, elixirs, and artifacts, are placed here quietly. You are the future successor of the Lu family, so Lu Feng, come in with us." Originally, the treasury of the Human King Palace was not open to anyone. Besides the four great ancestor and the current family head, only the three great ancestors could enter. However, Lu Feng was different. He was the future successor of the Human King and the Lu family, so his authority was no less than that of the family head. Therefore, Lu Feng was qualified to enter. Lu Feng felt extremely excited as he looked at the treasury, which was made entirely out of a mountain. Other aristocratic families and powers used buildings, but the Lu family used a mountain. The gap between them was really too big. When he saw Lu Feng's shocked expression, Lu Shun smiled proudly. He had also reacted the same way when he had first encountered such a situation. Now that he saw the most talented person in the history of the Lu family doing the same, he naturally felt better. When they arrived at the side of the terrifying mountain, Lu Shun walked straight through the huge door, which was over 100 meters wide. Lu Feng was stunned when he saw this. Wasn't the treasury of the Lu family so heavily guarded that one had to go through countless checks before entering? However, the treasury of the Lu family was so simple. It was completely unguarded. However, Lu Feng laughed self-deprecatingly a moment later. If someone could enter this place and obtain the treasures of the Lu family, then all the defensive measures would be useless. After all, this was the last sacred place of the Lu family, the Pure Land. Lu Feng followed behind Lu Shun and stepped into the door as well. The door was really just a door. There was no deep passageway inside. When Lu Feng walked in, he was once again shocked. There were countless treasures, divine objects, and artifacts in front of him. Of course, the most shocking thing was the elixirs. As one of the three great sacred path alchemy masters, Alchemy Saint Lu had already reached the limit of this aspect. However, due to the limitations of his aptitude, he had also reached the peak of his abilities. The great ancestor of the Lu family also understood that he would be an invincible almighty for the rest of his life. He had no hope of becoming the divine king or the alternate path supremacy. Therefore, he had given up on cultivating and making breakthroughs in the alchemy Tao. He had devoted all his time to the younger generation of the Lu family. Since he had nothing to do, 1,000 years was enough for Alchemy Saint Lu to refine countless elixirs. Lu Feng believed that the elixirs in front of him were only a portion of what alchemy Saint Lu had refined. The rest had probably been used by many other members of the Lu family. When he saw Lu Feng's slightly strange expression, Alchemy Saint Lu smiled gently. Lu Feng, do you believe me now? Lu Feng nodded gently. Previously, he had still doubted the words of the Lu family's great ancestor. After all, the number of elixirs used by the countless members of the Lu family was definitely a shocking number. Therefore, in Lu Feng's opinion, the Lu family should not have that many elixirs. However, what he saw at this moment overturned his understanding. Here are 5 million elixirs. Although they are all elementary and intermediate grade elixirs, it is enough to supply the cultivation of the younger generation of the Lu family. Elementary and intermediate grade elixirs were effective for martialists. As for advanced grade elixirs, if they were of perfect grade, they would be effective for ordinary divine beings or even true gods. However, the effect was not that obvious. Lu Feng nodded gently. However, he quickly returned to normal. He had just been shocked by the mountain of elixirs. However, it had only been a moment. After all, the number of elixirs Lu Feng had now was 6 times more than what was in front of him. The long river of elixirs he had seen before was much more shocking than this mountain of elixirs. Therefore, Lu Feng had only been shocked for a moment before he recovered. Lu Feng, do you want to come in with me to take a look? You have to know that the Lu family's ultimate accumulation is inside. When he heard this, Lu Feng shook his head gently. If it had been someone else, they might have been really interested. However, Lu Feng did not care about anything. His cultivation technique had already determined that he did not need too much help from resources. Ever since he had obtained the endless power of the King's Prayer, he had completely gotten rid of the need for elixirs. After condensing the embryonic form of the invincible combat body, Lu Feng's current body was equivalent to a weapon at the peak of grade 7. Therefore, he did not need any divine objects to create any weapons for himself. Furthermore, the sky-piercing Fudu in his consciousness space was the most amazing existence. Compared to the sky-piercing Fudu and the great desolation totem, the things in front of him were simply nothing. Therefore, Lu Feng did not care much about these things. Chapter 7:16. He shook his head and said, "That won't be necessary, family head. This time, I'll leave after putting down the items. I'll take a look when I have time on my way back." Upon seeing Lu Feng's appearance, Lu Shun knew that Lu Feng really didn't want to look anymore, so he didn't force him. Lu Feng looked around and finally found an incomparably spacious place. In the next moment, he walked over. Behind him, the 4 great ancestors and Lu Shun all focused their gazes on him. They knew that Lu Feng was going to release the elixirs he had obtained. He opened his independent space and countless elixirs poured out like flowing water. At first, they didn't react much, as the elixirs that Lu Feng had poured out were all low-grade elixirs. They were grade 1 and grade 2 elixirs, so they weren't considered precious. However, as time passed, a strange expression appeared on their faces. The number of elixirs that Lu Feng had poured out had already exceeded 5 million. 5 million! Although they had already guessed that Lu Feng had obtained more than 5 million elixirs, they were still a little shocked when they saw Lu Feng take them out. However, it was obvious that Lu Feng hadn't finished shocking them. It was far from over. A moment later, an even more terrifying scene appeared. "Those are mid-grade elixirs." Lu Shun's eyes glowed. Mid-grade elixirs were different from low-grade elixirs. Even martialists could use them. Although the Lu family had 5 million elixirs, more than 4 million of them were low-grade elixirs. The true mid-grade elixirs didn't even amount to 950,000. Gradually, the 4 patriarchs and Lu Shun's eyes became brighter and brighter. In the end, they were even more shocked. Up until now, the number of elixirs that Lu Feng had taken out had reached an astonishing 15 million. Among these 1,500 elixirs, there were more than 10 million mid-grade elixirs. This kind of number was simply shocking. They believed that even the number of mid-grade elixirs in the entire Federation wouldn't be much more than what was before them. Lu Feng, where the hell did he get such a terrifying amount of medicinal pills? No wonder he asked us to find a place that is big enough. He's right. If it's in the meeting hall, it won't be able to fit. The current number of pills was 15 million, which was almost 3 times the total amount of the Lu family's pills. It was no wonder that Lu Feng would say those words. However, the shock that Lu Feng had given them today was destined to not end so simply. After the appearance of the first high-grade elixir, countless high-grade elixirs began to appear like water. 30 million pills. 15 million high-grade medicinal pills. There are even close to 10 million perfect-quality, high-grade medicinal pills among them. It was truly shocking. As for the number of mid-grade pills in the entire Federation, they really couldn't be sure. However, they were very clear about this high-grade medicinal pill. Even if it was a large aristocratic family, the federal government, and their federal university, the total amount of high-grade pills they had would definitely not exceed 2 million. Among them, the perfect quality high-grade elixirs probably didn't even reach 500,000. However, the number of high-grade elixirs that Lu Feng had taken out had reached a shocking 15 million. Among them, there were close to 10 million perfect quality high-grade elixirs. This number was almost comparable to the total number of perfect quality high-grade elixirs in the entire universe. In an instant, even the 4 patriarchs, who were used to seeing things, were stunned. This amount was really indescribable. Finally, apart from the 1 million pills that he had left behind, Lu Feng had taken out all the pills he had. He heaved a sigh of relief. With so many pills, he believed that the strength of the entire Lu family and his friends would definitely increase by a lot. After everything was done, Lu Feng let out a long sigh of relief. He turned around and looked at the Grand Ancestor and the others. However, when Lu Feng looked over, he was slightly stunned because what he saw was the Grand Ancestor and the others' dull expressions. In the next moment, a faint smile appeared in Lu Feng's eyes. He knew that the 4 patriarchs and Patriarch Lu Shun were completely shocked. In fact, Lu Feng could understand their shock. After all, he was used to seeing everything now. When he saw the long river of pills again, he was also incomparably shocked. It was already very normal for them to have such expressions. Seeing that they still showed no signs of waking up, Lu Feng coughed softly. In the next moment, the patriarchs woke up from their daze. They looked at Lu Feng with a strange expression. There were countless complicated emotions intertwined between their expressions. Finally, after hesitating for a moment, the Grand Ancestor spoke. Lu Feng, where did you get these pills? Lu Feng didn't tell them because he didn't want to. Moreover, it shouldn't be easy for them to ask, but the number of pills at this moment was too shocking. So the Grand Ancestor finally asked. Hearing the Grand Ancestor's question, Lu Feng fell silent. After a long time, he shook his head gently. Grand Ancestor, there are some things I will tell you in the future, but not now. I have already collected all the pills that can be collected in that place. Therefore, there is no more stock. Moreover, the place I mentioned is quite special. You shouldn't be able to enter. If Lu Feng didn't have the densest bloodline of the human king, he definitely wouldn't be able to enter. In the entire Lu family, apart from him, there was no second person with such a bloodline density. Therefore, Lu Feng was destined to be the only one who could enter that huge futu. Of course, in addition to this reason, the main reason was because Lu Feng was worried. It was precisely because of these reasons that he didn't say it. Hearing Lu Feng's words, the Grand Ancestor and the others fell silent. However, they didn't ask any more because they knew Lu Feng's character. Since he said so, then everything was like this. Moreover, Lu Feng had already taken out such a shocking wealth. What else did he need to hide? Looking at Lu Feng, the Grand Ancestor was silent for a moment before asking, Lu Feng, are you sure you want to give all these pills to the family? These weren't pills worth 300 to 500 yuan, nor were they worth 30,000 to 50,000 yuan. These were pills worth a total of 30 million yuan. Although Lu Feng was a member of the Lu family, these pills belonged to him privately. Once he contributed them, it meant that Lu Feng wanted to give all these pills to all the children of the Lu family. With such a shocking wealth, it was believed that even the divine king would be moved and fight for it. And Lu Feng's style really could not be described with the word shocking. Hearing this, Lu Feng nodded solemnly. Since he took it out, it meant that he wanted to give it to the Lu family. If not, why would he have to hand it all over? Looking at the Grand Ancestor, Lu Feng said, Grand Ancestor, these are Lu Feng's compensation for helping the family. These pills are for the children of the Lu family to use for cultivation. However, I hope that one day, when my friends need it, the family can also take out a portion of it and give it to them. This time, the Grand Ancestor nodded without any hesitation. These things originally belonged to Lu Feng. Him being able to give them to the family was already very generous. If the family couldn't even guarantee this, then it was really too much. Looking at Lu Feng, the Grand Ancestor's eyes shone with a solemn light. Lu Feng, don't worry. As long as your friends need it, the family won't be stingy. Also, I can guarantee that if they need other things that aren't too excessive, the Lu family will help provide them. Hearing this, Lu Feng's face lit up slightly. He knew that since the Grand Ancestor had promised, he would definitely do it. In that case, he could leave with peace of mind. In that case, Lu Feng will take his leave first. In 3 days, Lu Feng will be in the conference hall waiting for the arrival of the ancestors. Coming out of the Human King Palace, Lu Feng headed in a direction. That was where Yuyo Qingran was in seclusion. According to the Grand Ancestor, Yuyo Qingran's seclusion had passed the most critical moment. Although she was still in seclusion, there was no problem in disturbing her. If not, Lu Feng wouldn't have gone to find her. The place Lu Feng went was given to him by the Lu family's Grand Ancestor. As the most monstrous existence in the history of the Lu family, Lu Feng naturally enjoyed incomparable treatment. As Lu Feng's closest person, Yuyo Qingran's treatment was terrifying. In addition to having the Lu family's Grand Ancestor to guide her cultivation, the Lu family's Grand Ancestor would occasionally help her. Moreover, Yuyo Qingran had done many things for Lu Feng. The pain and setbacks she had suffered over the years were known to the Lu family. In addition to her relationship with Lu Feng, Yuyo Qingran was treated like a little princess in the Lu family. Therefore, her seclusion place was one of the best places in the Lu family. Finally, Lu Fenglai arrived at the seclusion place. There were a few deity elders of the Lu family guarding this place. Their role was not to protect anything, as there was no need for any protection on the Lu family's humanoid king planet. The reason they were here was to deal with any unexpected incidents that might occur during seclusion. When Lu Fenglai arrived, several children of the Lu family were talking to the elders. When they saw Lu Feng, they all respectfully saluted. Seeing Lu Feng's arrival, a peak-level god spirit realm elder smiled and nodded in a friendly manner. "Young master, you're here." Lu Feng also smiled back. These were all his elders. Lu Feng would never use his status to do anything that would annoy them. Therefore, even if they were from the side branch of the Lu clan, Lu Feng would always face them with a polite smile. "Hello, elder, I'm here to look for Qingran. I don't know when she will come out." The elder's smile did not diminish. He slowly said, "The Grand Ancestor already told me. I just notified Yuyo Qingran. I believe she will come out soon." The seclusion place could not be casually entered because it would affect others. Therefore, if someone came to look for someone, they had to go through these elders. Since he had already notified them, Lu Feng was not in a hurry. He stood quietly in place, waiting for Yu Qingran to appear. A few of the Lu family's children looked at Lu Feng with reverence. Lu Feng was the faith of the younger generation. Naturally, he was also the faith of the younger generation of the Lu family. These people already knew about Lu Feng's crazy deed. Many of them could not have been done by the previous human king. Although Lu Feng had the protection of the Lu family and the human king was alone, Lu Feng had rarely relied on the family's power. He had endured all the hardships and pain he had experienced all by himself. Therefore, in the hearts of many of the younger generation, Lu Feng was comparable to the human king primogenitor. Time passed quickly, but Lu Feng felt that everything was moving very slowly. Finally, at the entrance of the seclusion pavilion, a figure quickly ran out. The moment he saw that figure, Lu Feng smiled. It was the most sincere smile that came from the depths of his heart. Qingran. It was a simple word, but it represented too much. Ever since he recovered his memories, Lu Feng felt a kind of pity for Yu Qingran. He knew everything that Yu Qingran had experienced. The last time he saw Yu Qingran was a matter of more than 10 years. Vaguely, Lu Feng recalled Yu Qingran's words. She said, "I'm waiting. Why haven't you come yet?" Chapter 7:17. Lu Feng. Yu Qingran stopped and looked at Lu Feng. There was a light in her eyes that had never been there before. During the time they were apart, she had also entered the Lu family's time realm to practice, so Lu Feng hadn't seen her for more than 10 years, and she hadn't seen Lu Feng for many years. Therefore, although they had only been in the original universe for a few months, it had been years or even more than 10 years for them. The next moment, Yu Qingran didn't care about the gazes of the people around them and threw herself into Lu Feng's arms. For 3 days, Lu Feng spent it all with Yu Qingran. Once again, they reminisced about everything they had experienced and missed the old days. At the last moment, Lu Feng also told Yu Qingran that he was leaving. Yu Qingran had already guessed this. She knew that there must be a reason why Lu Feng would spend so much time with her. As for Lu Feng's departure, she was really reluctant, but she also understood that since Lu Feng had made such a choice, there must be a reason why he had to go. Therefore, she didn't stop him, nor did she say anything that would make things difficult for Lu Feng. 3 days later, Yu Qingran went into seclusion. She didn't choose to send Lu Feng off because she didn't want to experience such a scene again. Once upon a time, it was that farewell that made her suffer endless pain in her heart. This time, she really didn't want to experience it again. In the Lu family's meeting hall, the 500 great ancestors above the heavenly god realm sat quietly. Hundreds of virtual king realm masters shook the world. The 4 great ancestors looked indifferent, but Lu Feng could feel that their power was gradually recovering. This time, the Lu family could be said to be in a complete turmoil. With such a terrifying lineup, it would be a piece of cake for them to dominate the world without the appearance of the heretics and the divine king. It could be said that the Lu family had truly decided to step out from behind the scenes and step onto the stage to display their power to the entire universe. The moment Lu Feng came in, many ancestors who were resting with their eyes closed opened their eyes one after another. At this moment, 500 pairs of eyes looked at Lu Feng at the same time. However, under these gazes, Lu Feng still looked the same as before. He didn't change at all and was incomparably indifferent. Pressure. The current Lu Feng was not afraid of any kind of pressure. His existence was enough to overlook everything. Looking at the many patriarchs, Lu Feng bowed respectfully. "Ancestor, I'm ready. I can set off at any time." Lu Feng's voice was resounding. At the moment, he was filled with a vigorous fighting spirit. Lu Feng's heart was pounding violently. His path to the sovereign realm was about to truly begin. In the eyes of others, including those monstrous geniuses of the new era, this clash of the sovereign realm meant the end of the sovereign realm's war. However, for Lu Fenglai, This was the beginning of the Sovereign Realm's war. His true journey had just begun. Many patriarchs stood up. Their essence, chi, and spirit reached their peak at this moment. The human monarch Lu family had been silent for thousands of years. It was time to bare their fangs and let the entire universe return to the era of the Lu family once again. Let's go! Although there were only 500 people in the group, it was a majestic sight. However, the power that these 500 people could unleash was even more terrifying than trillions of living beings combined. Among them, apart from Lu Feng, the weakest was a mid-level celestial god. There wasn't even a low-level one. The descent of a celestial god was enough to make a galaxy tremble. Among them, there were even powerhouses like the Virtual King. It could be said that the appearance of such a lineup was enough to make space and time tremble. In the eyes of the human monarch Lu family, there was no such thing as space-time turbulence at all. What they were looking for was the distance in a straight line. They didn't care about any restrictions here. The group of people tore through countless voids in a spectacular manner. The light of the stars was completely obscured by them. Countless living beings of the human race appeared one after another. They were all shocked when they saw this mighty group of people. These were all ordinary people. They couldn't come into contact with the level of martialists. Naturally, they didn't know what was going to happen this time. However, there were more or less martialists on every planet. They naturally knew what kind of earth-shattering event was going to happen. Emperor Lu Feng. This was the battle where Emperor Lu Feng set foot on the path of a true sovereign realm. It could be said that this was a battle that the entire universe was paying attention to. Perhaps even the Divine King was no exception. At this moment, countless existences had already focused all their attention on the battlefield in the outer region. Many martialists understood that for such an earth-shattering force to appear, it must all be a supreme evildoer. Such a mighty aura and terrifying majesty. I'm afraid it must be a supreme evildoer of our human race. Then, the group of people who just passed by, if it wasn't the supreme king of the Yuyo family, Yu Ronghua, then it must be the strongest in the world. The one who initiated the final battle of the sovereign realm, Emperor Lu Feng. Thinking that the person who just passed by might be the Emperor Lu Feng who shook the entire galaxy, many martialists felt their blood boiling. Since the human monarch era, although the human race was still the pinnacle overlord race of the universe and was only second to the monarch race, they had already lost their former glory. More than 500 years ago, the last divine king of the human race, the Divine King, fought in the void and reached the limit. He killed the Divine King of the alien race, the Supreme Divine King, but he also died in the end. Since then, the human race had entered an era of decline. 500 years, for a whole 500 years, there was not a single peerless Divine King born. During this period, only 2 supreme evildoers were born. Perhaps in the eyes of other races, it was already very shocking to have 2 supreme evildoers born in 500 years. However, in the eyes of the human race, this was simply a joke. In 500 years, the human race could already produce a supreme divine king, let alone 2 evildoers. Therefore, the human race really couldn't bear it anymore. They were already crazily looking forward to the time when they would truly rise. Now Lu Feng had appeared. His strength was acknowledged by the universe and made the world tremble. Everyone in the human race believed, and firmly believed, that as long as Lu Feng existed, the human race would definitely enter a new era in the future. That was the era of the Emperor. Countless humans were in an uproar. They knew and firmly believed that the final victory would definitely belong to the human race. The greatest era was about to arrive. Outside the Aslan Black Hole colony, the Lu family's group had already arrived. Guarding this place were the various pinnacle overlord races. Other than the human race, there were countless experts stationed here. They were guarding the passageways of the various races, preventing other races from wantonly entering the battlefield through their passageways and causing a shocking massacre in their own cities. When Lu Feng's group arrived, there was already an incomparably lively scene. The Aslan Black Hole Colony was the largest and most unique black hole colony in the universe. This place was connected to the battlefield of the Outlands, and the strength was limited. Basically, most existences could pass through. Every day, countless existences would want to pass through this place to enter the battlefield of the Outlands. Therefore, the passageways of the various pinnacle Overlord races were incomparably lively. However, in the past few months, the liveliness had reached a crazy level. Every day, there would be 10 times or even 100 times more existences entering the battlefield of the Outlands through this place. They all knew the significance of this battle. Therefore, even those ancient overlords who were in seclusion had all appeared. Looking at the Lu family's group, the originally noisy scene instantly quieted down. Countless people cast their gazes over, their expressions filled with incomparable shock. Although the human king's Lu family was once a taboo existence among the various pinnacle overlord races, after thousands of years, even if they occasionally appeared, their reputation had gradually declined. In Lu Feng's generation, many foreign race existences knew about the decline of the human king's Lu family's younger generation. Therefore, there was a rumor in the universe that the human king's Lu family had long lost their former unparalleled prestige. Following the decline of the human race, they had fallen from their divine altar. Although they might still have strength, they were not that scary anymore. However, with Lu Feng's powerful appearance in the past few years and the human king's Lu family producing at least 2 heretic supremes, this rumor collapsed. Not to mention anything else, just the existence of 2 heretic supremes was enough to guarantee that the human king's Lu family would not decline for the next few thousand years. And among the younger generation there was also Lu Feng, the #1 existence of all time. It could be said that in the past few years, the human king's Lu family's reputation had once again resounded throughout the galaxy era. Today, when many existences saw the terrifying lineup of the Lu family, they became even more determined. Too terrifying! This is the terror of the human king's Lu family. This is the foundation of the human king's Lu family. 500 people, just 500 people. However, these 500 people are a terrifying force capable of inflicting heavy losses on the pinnacle overlord races, even if the divine king doesn't appear. 500 existences above the heavenly god realm and hundreds of virtual king powerhouses. 30 exceptional almighties and 4 unparalleled almighties. Luxurious, terrifying, pinnacle, domineering. This is the human king's Lu family. This is the foundation of our human race. Countless existences of the human race were shouting. They were unable to describe the agitation in their hearts. Such a foundation of the human race made them excited and filled them with longing. Originally, it would only take 2 days for the Lu family to arrive at the Aslan's black hole community. However, the Lu family's group took a full half a month to arrive. They were not in a hurry to travel. Instead, they chose to arrive here in a grandiose manner that shocked everyone. This represented a kind of proclamation, a kind of attitude. This was proof that the human king's Lu family had returned. The human king's Lu family that had caused the entire galaxy era to tremble in the past had returned to the mortal world. Up until now, half of the agreed 3-month period had passed. There was still 1.5 months before the final battle of the kings would occur. More and more existences started to rush over. When they arrived at the human race's void castle in the Aslan's black hole community, the existences of the Lu family were not in a hurry to enter. Instead, they waited quietly at the side. This time, many existences of the human race had clearly expressed that they would send true powerhouses to accompany them. They had to ensure Lu Feng's safety. After all, the human race could not afford to lose Lu Feng. Many existences of the Lu family were waiting quietly here. Chapter 7:18. Another 5 days passed. During this period, countless existences entered the battlefield. According to the Federation's statistics, the number of rogue cultivators and humans that entered the battlefield had reached a shocking number of trillions. Moreover, the final number wouldn't be so simple. In the last few days, the number would surpass the current number, far surpassing the current number. On the 6th day, many existences of the Federation's human race finally arrived. This time, the lineup that arrived was a terrifying force that could shake the entire galaxy. Because in addition to the Federation's government and the Federal University, the other 7 Divine King clans and many first-rate clans all sent their strongest existences. Of course, Lu Feng understood after thinking about it for a while. Although the monstrous geniuses of the various clans might not be able to participate, it didn't mean that their descendants couldn't come and watch. This symbolized the clash of the strongest youths in the endless space-time. Such a battle would bring endless benefits to any existence. Therefore, the descendants of these clans definitely wouldn't miss it. Naturally, the ancestors of these clans would also appear. After all, even they wanted to watch. Of the 7 Divine King clans, Yuyo Rong and Yuyo of the Yuyo clan finally arrived. This time, the Yuyo clan's grand ancestor and second ancestor both arrived. These were 2 invincible almighties. As for the other 6 Divine King clans, 6 invincible almighties also appeared. This time, the Federal University actually sent out 3 peerless Void Emperors, which were equivalent to 3 invincible almighties. Due to the uniqueness of the Void Emperors, they were almost at the level of the 4 ancestors of the Lu clan. As for the Federation's government, they also had 3 invincible almighties. In addition to these, the ancestors of the first-rate Lu clan, Beigong Primogenitor, and Nanming Primogenitor also arrived. These were also 3 invincible almighties. Although the other clans didn't have any invincible almighties, any of their ancestors were at the level of an invincible almighty. Therefore, the lineup that appeared this time was truly shocking, completely shocking the world. 21 invincible almighties. Such a lineup was more than the total number of invincible almighties of many pinnacle overlords. There were more than 150 peerless supreme masters, and nearly 500 origin kings. This was the lineup of the human race. Without any concealment, the many existences of the human race stood quietly in the void for all other existences to worship. Evidently, the other pinnacle overlord races had also received the news. However, all they could do was remain silent and exclaim in amazement, because such a lineup was simply impossible for them to resist. If the Divine King wasn't present, these existences from the human race would be enough to punish any of the peak overlord races. This was what all the peak overlord races were thinking. Lu Feng's friends, such as Li Yongheng and Su Wenchao, as well as the desolate emperor and Beigong Tianxi, as well as the direct descendants of various aristocratic families, had all arrived. They stood quietly by Lu Feng's side, guarding the majesty of the emperor. However, at this moment they still didn't leave. This was because Lu Feng didn't want to leave yet. His will alone was enough to control everyone's actions. He was waiting for someone. He was waiting for 2 of the most important people. 2 days later, an unparalleled crack appeared in the void. The terrifying and violent energy caused the starry sky to tremble. Countless people cast their gazes towards the edge of the crack. Everyone who came here was incomparably low-key. This was because there were too many almighties here. There were even 21 invincible almighties. Unless it was the Divine King or an invincible almighty, no one would dare to be so arrogant. However, when they saw the people who came, all the words they wanted to say disappeared. There were only 2 figures, one male and one female. Both of them were extremely young. However, the existence of these 2 silhouettes silenced countless existences. 20 years ago, you shook the entire galaxy era. You became the nightmare of countless young people of that era. Then, in the foreign battlefield, your path to becoming the Divine King was destroyed by the Nether King progenitor. Since then, you have disappeared without a trace. Many people thought that you had lost your heart after your path to becoming the Divine King was destroyed. However, 20 years later, you have appeared once again. You have returned once again. Godslayer Lu Tao, the former king of Slaughter Lu Tao, the current king of Slaughter Lu Tao, you have returned. Countless people were shocked. Many of the young people grew up listening to the story of Godslayer Lu Tao. However, because of the existence of the Nether King progenitor, Lu Tao's path to becoming the Divine King was destroyed. This once invincible existence of an era completely disappeared. This was the greatest regret in the hearts of countless young people of the human race. But now, he had returned. He wasn't dispirited or dispirited. He didn't give up. In his less than 50 years of age, he had achieved an unparalleled miracle. He had actually returned as a king. Countless existences finally understood why Lu Feng hadn't moved even though everyone had arrived. It turned out that he had been waiting for his father, the pride of the human race in the past. The two peerless geniuses. Although they are father and son, it doesn't matter. They are the two peerless geniuses of the human race. One family with two kings, peerless and invincible. The glory of this era will be displayed by their family. Lu Tao had returned. He quietly looked at Lu Feng, but his expression was filled with madness and killing intent. This was the real Lu Tao of the past. He was incomparably arrogant and domineering. He killed the foreign race's younger generation until their blood flowed like a river. He was as terrifying as a nightmare. Xiaofeng, Daddy is here. It was a simple sentence, but it represented an unparalleled determination. I am here. Before you become invincible, I am here. I am here to protect you. The current Lu Tao was truly terrifying. He made people tremble in fear. His strength didn't lie in his own intrinsic strength. It also lay in his pride and heart. Countless existences had already sensed that Lu Tao had been crowned as a king. He had become a virtual king. With his combat strength, no one could suppress him unless it was an 8th-level peerless almighty. How is this possible? How is this possible? How can Lu Tao, the God Slayer, reach such a terrifying realm? He is an epic monster. At most, he is comparable to a 7th-level virtual king. But why does he give me the feeling that he is no different from those peak peerless almighty? Many human race peerless almighty couldn't believe it. They didn't understand why Lu Tao was so shocking. Logically speaking, he should be on par with Feather Yu and Rong Hua. But at this moment, the feeling that Lu Tao gave them was even more shocking and terrifying than those epic monsters who had comprehended 4 types of supreme strength. Besides Lu Feng and Yen Chenwei, no one else understood this. Lu Tao had studied for 2 years and came into contact with the mysteries of the Divine King. This had allowed his power of power to rise again. It could be said that he now carried the will and majesty of the true Divine King. Looking at the endless space and time, Lu Tao was truly heaven-defying. Lu Feng nodded his head gently and heavily. This was his father, the greatest existence of the past. Heavenly God Jialan might have been tyrannical or unparalleled, but he had fallen in the end. However, his father had climbed back up after falling and entered a whole new realm. His future achievements wouldn't stop at the Divine King's level. This was Lu Feng's conviction. His conviction was unparalleled. Father, I have been waiting for you. When he heard this, Lu Tao laughed heartily. His bold and unrestrained attitude was unmistakable. That cultured and refined image of the past was naturally gone. Lu Feng knew that this was his father's true face. The past him had just been a cover-up. Now, he had finally broken all the shackles. His father had finally returned to being the real Lu Tao. Lu Tao glanced around and saw many members of the Lu family nod their heads gently. He didn't salute them, as he had already become the virtual king. There was no need for such formalities. In the end, Lu Tao's gaze landed on Lu Feng after he scanned the crowd. Xiaofeng, father will protect you this time. No one will be able to hurt you. This is father's promise. No one will be able to hurt you. When they heard Lu Tao's words, many people frowned slightly. They felt that Lu Tao was really too arrogant. Although he had now entered the virtual king's domain and was comparable to a peerless almighty, there were still 21 almighties. But now there were 21 invincible almighties on the human side. Any one of them could easily suppress Lu Tao. In the eyes of many people, his words were too arrogant. However, Lu Feng didn't see it that way. He only looked at Lu Tao with an expression of endless turmoil and unconcealable excitement. Father, could it be that you? Lu Tao laughed wildly. That's right. I have completely succeeded. This time, I can shatter that domain at any time. Now I am the real Killer King. The real Killer King. The real Supreme King, the Real Supreme King. The current Lu Tao was really invincible. In this 1 month's time, he had actually studied the last of the profound mysteries. He had already forged his physical body to the extreme. Because of the early contact, not only did Lu Tao make up for the regrets of the past, but he had also truly touched the existence of that domain. Now, he was just a universe supreme at the virtual king's level. Lu Feng sucked in a deep breath of cold air. The divine king was invincible and looked down on all living creatures because of the existence of the 3 forbidden mythological domains. And because of this opportunity, Lu Tao could break that shackle at any time. In other words, as long as Lu Tao needed it, he could break the forbidden mythological domain at any time and have the combat power of the divine king. The words he said were absolutely not false at all. Lu Feng nodded fiercely again, and his eyes were filled with pride. Since ancient times, there were only a handful of people who could break the 3 forbidden mythological domains before reaching the divine king's level. And in this era, only the overlords of the 3 forbidden mythological domains and the human king could do it. Now Lu Tao was the 5th supreme of this era. Looking at everyone, Lu Tao didn't explain anything because he couldn't be bothered to do so. Finally, Lu Tao nodded gently. At this moment, Lu Feng didn't hesitate. He looked at the Great Ancestor and said softly, "Great Ancestor, let's go." Chapter 719. Seeing that so many existences had arrived, the Lu family's grand ancestor's eyes flashed with a hint of turmoil. In terms of status, he was the Lu family's grand ancestor. Even the invincible almighties of the Federation government couldn't compare to him. In terms of influence, he was Alchemy Saint Lu, one of the 3 great alchemy saints in the universe. He was incomparably respected. In addition, Lu Feng was a descendant of the Lu family, so this time, in the absence of the Divine King or the otherworldly Supreme, the Lu family's grand ancestor became the decisive figure. There were only 38 days left. At this time, all existences had arrived. They didn't have to wait for anything. At this moment, the Lu family's grand ancestor slowly walked into the endless void. His voice rang out clearly at this moment, causing the entire space-time to tremble. Who said that the human race is at its end? There's no hope. Everyone was silent, their eyes burning. Who said that the human race has fallen and is about to fall from the altar? Everyone was silent, but they were slightly shaken. Who said that the human race has fallen and no more monsters will be born? The younger generation was no longer silent. They shouted out the voices in their hearts. Their roars caused the human race to tremble. Someone! In the next moment, a terrifying light flashed in the Grand Ancestor's eyes. Then, what should we do? What should they do? What should they do? What should they do? Since that was the case then, shatter! Shatter! shatter heaven and earth, shatter the sun and moon, shatter space-time. Let this era prove the glory of the human race. Let this era witness the backbone of the human race. Fight, fight, fight. The boundless void trembled continuously. The gods and countless world-shocking existences in the sky let out the deepest roars in their hearts at the same time. They had had enough. They had been waiting for far too long. Heavenly God Jiaolan, God-slaying Lu Tao. The glory of the human race, the pride of the human race, but they didn't have a good ending. In the end, they all declined. Therefore, the human race was rejected by many peak Overlord. The human race had no tomorrow. After the once incomparably glorious era ended, the human race would inevitably fall from the altar and become a thing of the past. But, at the final moment, the human tribe had appeared. He had appeared. With the hope of the humankind, with the future of the humankind, he walked out of the endless time and space, holding up the young sky of the humankind with his own arms, and holding up the future of the humankind with his own backbone. Emperor! 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 At this moment, it wasn't only the younger generation that was shouting. Even many of the older generation had begun to move in a frenzy. They had been waiting for too long. They were looking forward to the true rise. They looked at the crowd. Finally, countless gazes fell on Lu Feng. At this moment, he was the focus of attention like never before, the focus of the hope of the human race. Lu Feng didn't remain silent. In the blink of an eye, he took a step forward and reached the peak. In his eyes, there was a domineering aura that looked down on everything, and it was the responsibility to shoulder everything. His voice echoed through the void, through time and space, through heaven and earth, and through the passage of time. Start the battle, let's go! The most powerful existences of the human race had even exceeded 100,000 people. These 100,000 people of the human race were all existences above the god level. In the past, there were only 50 gods of the human race on the surface, but now there were more than 100,000 gods of the human race. Moreover, Lu Feng also believed and understood that this was definitely not the final number of the human race. The human race must have a more powerful foundation. After entering the battlefield in the outer region, they flew directly to the medicine god domain. These people didn't use the teleportation array because this was the moment of the human race's rise and revival. They didn't need to hide. They wanted to arrive in the most shocking way and let all the other races know the terrifying power of the human race. Along the way, any existence that saw the terrifying combat strength of the human race was extremely frightened. Those powerful lone wolves in the past had dared to plunder a team of 1,000,000 people. However, when they saw the human race's team, they all shrank back. Everyone understood that the current momentum of the human race had reached its peak. No matter who it was, as long as they dared to provoke them, there was no chance of survival. They could only be completely suppressed. Any lone wolf, even the invincible almighty existences, didn't dare to have any other thoughts about the human race at this moment. Among the 100,000 gods, there were nearly 500 virtual king almighty existences. Such a terrifying lineup was enough to destroy any peak overlord race. Time continued to pass. By relying on flight and their own space-time travel, more than a month had passed when the human race arrived at the medicine god domain. At this moment, there were less than 2 days left before the Battle of March. Outside the medicine god domain, all the alchemy grandmasters of the Alchemist Alliance appeared. This was a treatment that no other race had received. Of course, this was not only because the human race's lineup was too terrifying. It was more because of the existence of the Lu family's grand ancestor. He was a Saint Path alchemist, Saint Path Alchemist Lu. The arrival of one person was enough to make many alchemy grandmasters appear. Talatus walked at the forefront. Looking at the many humans, his eyes were filled with an indescribable color. Lu Feng left the medicine god domain less than a year ago. However, he never expected that Lu Feng would shock the world to such an extent after just a year. These alchemy grandmasters of the Alchemist Alliance were also aware of his achievements in the outside world. After Lu Feng chose the medicine god domain as the battlefield, they didn't object. It wasn't only because of Saint Path alchemist Lu Feng, but also because of Lu Feng himself and their alliance master's tacit consent. Otherwise, even the Divine King wouldn't have chosen the battlefield here without their permission. The human race didn't rashly enter. They stood in front of many grandmasters and were incomparably quiet. Finally, Talatus walked out. He looked at the Lu family's grand ancestor and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Saint Path alchemist Lu." The grand ancestor smiled and nodded gently. "I wonder if the human race's encampment has been properly arranged." Previously, the Grand Ancestor had already contacted the Alchemist Alliance. They had allowed the powerhouses of the major races to enter the Medicine God domain and even the Medicine God city to watch this shocking battle. That was why the Grand Ancestor asked. Taratus nodded his head gently. "Master has already arranged it. Your location is in the Medicine God city." The Master Talatus mentioned was Saint Path Alchemist Rong, the Alliance Master of the Alchemist Alliance, one of the 3 great alchemy grandmasters in the world. Hearing this, the Grand Ancestor didn't ask anything else. 100,000 human gods followed behind Talatus and walked into the city. Looking at the countless beings on both sides of the road and the entire Medicine God domain, Lu Feng's heart trembled slightly. Previously, he had participated in the once-in-a-century alchemist conference, but the number of people at that gathering was far inferior to this one. At this moment, the number of people here was more than 10 times more than in the past. Lu Feng chuckled in his heart. Although the alchemist conference was very attractive, it was nothing to most warriors. They were just there to watch the show. They didn't care about anything at all. After all, elixir pills were always auxiliary to a martialist. Although the status of an alchemist was incomparably noble, the ones who truly determined everything in the entire universe were the supreme powerhouses. In their eyes, everything was illusory. Only the greatest strength was the true essence. Therefore, this time, Lu Feng started the final battle of the War of the Kings and really attracted the attention of countless beings. There were only 100,000 people in the human race. Compared to the huge number here, it was not even a drop in the ocean. However, their appearance really shocked the entire era. 100,000 gods, 500 virtual kings, and 21 invincible almighties. Such strength made the entire era of the universe tremble. Countless beings appeared from the void, from the buildings, and from both sides of the road. They were all paying attention to the existence of the human race. These people understood that the human race's terrifying upheaval meant that they had decided to walk out again. Ever since the fall of the Divine King 500 years ago, the human race had implemented a strategy of not competing. Although they faced the strength of the other races, they had never opened up any territory. They had not even set foot in the empty spacetime of the Outerverse. However, it was different now. They had made such a high-profile appearance and even started to use their hidden strength. This meant that the human race was no longer enduring. They had decided to restore their former glory. If it was only the appearance of an epic freak, then perhaps the human race wouldn't be so crazy. After all, the epic freak was an existence that was bound to be the Divine King. However, the existence of an emperor is different. His existence has already surpassed the limits of any restrictions. He is completely the reincarnation of the human monarch of the past. No, it can be said that he has already surpassed the human monarch of the past. An emperor, let alone the Divine King, can even step into the invincible realm of the human monarch. The human race's crazy performance is all to prove to the entire universe that Emperor Lu Feng is the key to the human race's protection. If they want to kill the emperor, then they will have to face 100,000 human deities, the human monarchs, and the final hidden strength of the human race. In order to protect the Emperor, the human race is willing to pay any price. Yes, for the sake of Emperor Lu Feng, the human race was really prepared to do everything. At this moment, if anyone dared to have any ideas about Lu Feng, then they would definitely suffer the most terrifying annihilation of the human race. Countless people with ulterior motives gave up. Without the divine king overseeing the human race, trying to kill Lu Feng while he was under the protection of 21 invincible almighties was undoubtedly akin to ascending to the heavens. All geniuses and evildoers are protected by the universe's origin. The more talented an existence is, the harder it is to kill them. As for the supreme monarchs, unless they are the supreme monarchs themselves, killing them will bring a great disaster to their own race. As for the taboo monarchs, according to ancient legends, the 4 taboo monarchs have never fallen in any era. Therefore, unless it is absolutely necessary to kill them, don't make a move. Otherwise, you will alert the enemy. Just wait. My emperor will descend in a few days. At that time, even with the help of the medicine god territory's hidden strength, you will definitely not be able to stop my emperor. After entering their own territory, many of the human race's existences were incomparably silent. Although this was Lu Feng's battle, they also understood that there were too many people among the other peak overlords who were paying attention to Lu Feng. If they were not careful, a shocking battle would occur, and that would be their battle. Therefore, every existence above the deity level was incomparably cautious. Lu Feng had already left the human race's territory. After all, in addition to being the main character of this battle and the emperor of the human race, he was also the alchemy master Fudu. In the medicine god territory, Lu Feng's reputation was also extremely resounding. Of course, the reason for this resounding reputation was not because of how terrifying he was on the path of martial arts, but because of his Fudu as an alchemy master, who had created many shocking miracles. In the central building of the Alchemist Alliance, Lu Feng sat in his seat, surrounded by alchemy grandmasters. This time, in order to ensure the stability of the battle and the safety of the medicine god territory, all 13 alchemy grandmasters had been recalled. Among them, Lu Feng knew 10 of them. As for the remaining 2, he was familiar with them through the introductions of the others. Chapter 720. To cultivators, alchemists were just a resource that provided them with cultivation resources. To be honest, cultivators didn't think highly of alchemists. The same went for alchemists. In their hearts, cultivators were just a bunch of barbarians. They kept killing here and there just for some illusory target. That was why they also looked down on warriors. However, Lu Feng was a special case. These alchemists treated him differently. After all, just the fact that he was comparable to a human monarch was enough to make Lu Feng a truly great existence in their hearts. Moreover, Lu Feng's talent in alchemy was unparalleled. He was recognized by many as someone who could become a divine master in alchemy. After chatting for a while, the presidents of the other 4 alchemist halls left. They belonged to the other peak overlord races and stood on the side of their own race. Therefore, it wasn't appropriate for them to hear what was about to happen. Naturally, these people also understood. Therefore, they left without waiting for Lu Feng and the others to speak. In an instant, a few independent grandmasters with different ethnic leanings also left. There were only 8 grandmasters left in the meeting hall. Lu Feng, how confident are you in this battle? After a moment of silence, Alchemist Ying Tijia asked the question in her heart. She was the oldest alchemist in the Alchemist Alliance, and even among the 13 alchemists. Because of her age, she paid special attention to the younger generation. She really didn't want their hope in alchemy to fall like this. Therefore, she asked the question she was worried about. At the same time, everyone looked at Lu Feng. They were also paying close attention, especially the 2 alchemists of the human race. Hearing this, Lu Feng fell silent for a moment. No one could see through Lu Feng's thoughts. After a long time, Lu Feng finally raised his head slowly. At this moment, his eyes were filled with an extremely strange expression. Confidence, I don't even have the slightest confidence. The faces of the 13 grandmasters froze when they heard this. They stared at Lu Feng in disbelief, as if they couldn't believe that Lu Feng would say something like that. You're not confident? How can you not be confident? You are the Emperor. The Void Spirit Grandmaster's expression was extremely ugly. He was an alchemy grandmaster of the human race. His heart and soul were all for the human race. He really couldn't believe or tolerate Lu Feng's lack of confidence. If you don't have the confidence, then why did you start this world-shaking war? The battle was initiated by Lu Feng. It was initiated by himself without being forced by anyone. In the eyes of many, Lu Feng made such a crazy decision because he had absolute confidence in himself. But now, it seemed that everything was not as they had imagined. Lu Feng didn't have any confidence at all. Hearing this, Lu Feng smiled. It was a strange smile that confused and puzzled everyone. After a long time, Lu Feng's voice finally rang out slowly. If I had the confidence, then this battle wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have initiated it. Lu Feng's words made everyone fall into deep thought. Although it had only been 2 years since his debut, the battles that Lu Feng had experienced in these 2 years could be said to be endless. Moreover, many of the battles could be said to be unparalleled classic. They were existences that were akin to miracles. Other than the few times he had fought against weak opponents, when had he, the Emperor, ever fought when he had the confidence to win? In the previous battle, when I collided with the young Netherworld King and completely suppressed him, I had already used all my strength. Other than the moves that were harmful to myself, I had already used everything that I could. During these 3 months, I didn't cultivate at all. I spent my time peacefully. Although the battle with young Netherworld King made me improve a little, it was still far from reaching that kind of shocking level. For this battle, I don't have any confidence. Everyone continued to remain silent. Indeed, although the young Netherworld King was shocking, none of the existences that were going to fight with Lu Feng were weak. They were all existences that were stronger than the young Netherworld King. Not to mention other things, just the fact that they were at the peak of the 4th Heaven Demigod realm was enough to explain everything. The young Netherworld King had just stepped into the 4th Heaven Demigod realm. However, people like the Crown Prince of the Heavenly Tao and the 31st Prince had already begun to ignite their divine fire. Both of them had 4 types of supreme powers and 2 of them were at the pinnacle of supreme powers. They were definitely stronger than the young Netherworld King. Therefore, it was reasonable that Lu Feng didn't have the confidence to win. After being silent for a long time, they seemed to have finally figured it out. These grandmasters also returned to their calm state. Actually, the one you should pay attention to this time is the Emperor's son. Hearing these 2 words, Lu Feng's eyes shone with a dazzling brilliance. Emperor's son? He had heard this name several times. As for this person who had just appeared and quickly became Lu Feng's #1 opponent in the hearts of many existences, he was also paying special attention to him. After hesitating for a while, Lu Feng still asked, "Is the Emperor's son really that powerful?" Many grandmasters were silent. After a while, the one who spoke was Grandmaster Ing Taika. The monarch race is known as the #1 overlord race in the universe. Since ancient times, they have been the #1 overlord race for an endless amount of time. Except for the time when the human king appeared in the human race, they have always been the most powerful overlord race. Lu Feng nodded gently. Actually, he knew more about the monarch race than these people. This was because he already knew about the existence of the 3 great sacred races from Jiahuawu. The 3 great sacred races were races that could carry out inheritances across eras. Other than Jiahua's bloodline, The other two bloodlines were the Indra race's bloodline of the monarch race and the human race's Emperor Tai's bloodline. Sakra's bloodline had chosen to integrate into the Emperor clan very early on, and became the true leader of the clan. They had the inheritance of the Saint clan, which was incomparably terrifying. Except for the other two Saint clans, no one could compare with them. And after these years of development, relying on countless resources, perhaps even the other two Saint clans couldn't compare with them. This Emperor's son was the supreme king of the Indra race. The news of the Emperor's son's existence is very vague. Before he officially appeared, not even a bit of information was leaked. However, according to the tradition of the monarch race, if the Emperor's son cannot suppress the current generation, then they would rather abandon it and not let the Emperor's son exist in an era. This is the pride of the monarch race. An indescribable light appeared in Lu Feng's eyes. At this moment, he was really shocked. Lu Feng really did not understand the monarch race. He did not understand at all. The few things he knew were some common knowledge. Of course, the Indra race was an exception. However, he did not expect that the monarch race was actually such a proud race. If they could not be the strongest in an era, then they would rather not appear. If they appeared, they would definitely be the strongest. This was the monarch race. Knowing that there are so many monstrous geniuses, the monarch race still released the Emperor's son. This can only prove one thing. The Emperor's son is really supreme and terrifying. He is really an existence that makes billions of living beings fear. We guess that since the Emperor's son can accept your challenge, then he must be an existence that is almost about to ignite the divine fire. Moreover, it is very likely that he has comprehended the terror of 5 supreme powers. As the Emperor's son, his combat strength is absolutely terrifying. In the case of having the same aptitude, relying on the countless years of inheritance of the monarch race, I am afraid that he is stronger than ordinary existences. Hearing this, Lu Feng fell into deep thought. According to this analysis, the Emperor's son was indeed his greatest enemy now. When he used his 2 souls, he could challenge existences that were 3 levels higher. However, when it came to someone who was almost invincible like the Emperor's son, he really felt that he did not know where to start. Looking at Lu Feng, Grandmaster Yingtika continued, Lu Feng, we believe that if you are at the same level, then no matter how powerful the Emperor's son is, he is no match for you. However, in the current situation, you are really worried. In the case of being at the same level, Lu Feng had comprehended 7 supreme powers, all of which were at the peak or even beyond the peak. This was far stronger than the Emperor's son. Moreover, the existence of 2 souls made him even more invincible. Even the immortal kings and demon kings were no match for him. Now, he had condensed the embryonic form of the invincible war body. After the extreme eruption and the support of the great demon power, he might even be able to compete with or surpass the ordinary truth divine body. However, this was under the situation of being at the same level. The real situation now was that Lu Feng was 3 levels lower than the Emperor's son. This was something that could not be made up for. Everyone looked at Lu Feng. They wanted to see if Lu Feng was still confident. This was not a deliberate blow. They hoped that Lu Feng could recognize everything clearly and not be blinded by excessive glory and underestimate the enemy too much. After a long time, Lu Feng finally woke up from his deep thoughts. There was a look in his eyes that no one could understand. Is this not good? Hearing these simple words, everyone was slightly taken aback. They looked at Lu Feng in confusion, completely unable to understand the meaning of these words. When ordinary people heard that there was such a terrifying opponent, the first thing they would think of would be how to deal with it and how to deal with it. However, Lu Feng said, "Is this not good?" This was puzzling. Lu Feng looked at them and just chuckled. He did not explain anything, because he knew that they would not understand what he said. Apart from the top monsters, no one would understand. Chapter 721. There were only 2 days left until the final round of the D competition. In these last 2 days, Lu Feng declined all visitors. He only existed quietly in his room, abnormally silent. Everyone knew that Lu Feng was deep in thought and adjusting his state. He wanted to face all the confrontations in his peak state. On the last day, the Sky Dao Race's Sky Dao Crown Prince appeared and returned to the Sky Dao Race's camp. At the same time, the 31st Prince of the Serene Blood Race arrived and returned to the Serene Blood Race's camp to adjust his state. At noon, many powerhouses from the Monarch race appeared. The Emperor Prince ascended into the sky. Power was limitless, ready to fight at any time. In the afternoon, the Supreme King of the Celestial Race, the Spirit King, descended, controlling the 9 stars in the sky. Originally, everyone thought that these 4 people were the final existences to be challenged. However, no one expected that the real climax wasn't over yet. At sunset, at the final moment, a world-shaking tremor really arrived. The Battle God race had produced a Supreme King, a titled Battle King. He was the current High Priest of the Battle God race, and was the leader of the Battle God race's faith. For Lu Feng, he walked out of the unknown and walked into reality, letting everyone know of his existence. However, everything wasn't over. Everything was far from over. Soon after, the Empyrean demon Holy Son of the Sky Fiend clan appeared as well. To everyone's surprise, the Empyrean demon Holy Son had also concealed his identity and strength. He was also a peak demigod Supreme King. At this moment, the number of Supreme Kings that walked out reached a shocking 6. The 8 peak Overlord races had all given birth to monstrous geniuses. In the same era, they had all given birth to Supreme Kings. Such a scene had clearly never happened before. It was beyond anyone's expectations. Besides the Underworld race's young Underworld monarch, who had been suppressed by Lu Feng, the 7 monstrous geniuses of the 8 peak Overlord races had all appeared. This Battle of the Kings was destined to be the most shocking battle in history. It would surpass any peak battle. The last day had finally arrived. At this moment, countless existences were walking out of the Medicine God territory towards the vast and empty area. The location of this battle was outside the Medicine God territory. The battlefield was a terrifying battle stage built with a 9th-grade divine object as the main body. With a length and width of nearly 100,000 miles, such a huge platform was even larger than a 2nd-grade life planet. However, at this moment, when countless existences gathered here, none of them felt that this place was huge. Other than Lu Feng, the rest of the 7 demigod-level geniuses who were going to fight were all peak demigod-level Supreme Kings. Their battle prowess was no weaker than that of a high-level true god. Therefore, this battle stage was nothing to them. Of course, it was very extravagant to use a 9th-grade divine object to build a battle platform with the combat power of a real god. However, if the opponents were the 7 supreme beings, no one would say anything. The 7 of them were not inferior to the Divine King at all. When they were together, even the Temporal Overlord would pale in comparison. This was because everyone knew that the final victor of this battle would become the only existence that could peek into the Emperor's path. In the future, he would definitely be able to enter the Emperor's path and become the Supreme Overlord of this era. Therefore, even though everything was extravagant, it was not excessive in the eyes of everyone. It even seemed extremely simple and crude. The most turbulent moment was now. Countless geniuses had gathered and geniuses were everywhere. Almost everyone who was qualified to come here and watch was either a demonic genius or a peak genius from each family. If not for this, how could the experts from their families bring them here despite the billions of spacetime barriers? In the past, the King of Massacre was the pinnacle of monsters. However, in this era, the King of Massacre didn't even have the qualifications to step onto the stage. As for the even more powerful Massacre King, he was reduced to a mere spectator. The only thing he could do was to quietly watch this unprecedented battle from below the stage. Many demonic geniuses of the human race had arrived. For example, the desolate Emperor Wan Yueming, Qi Liang, and other existences were all present. In their eyes, Lu Feng would definitely be the final victor. Other than Lu Feng, everyone else was nothing. After all, this battle was started by Lu Feng. Finally, as noon arrived, a shocking phenomenon appeared in the sky. It was a scene of flowers spreading out and time rotating. This was a shocking phenomenon that caused the world to exclaim in admiration and time to bow down in worship. Countless existences sighed endlessly when they saw this scene. They understood that this was not man-made. It was completely natural and was given by time and space. This is a monster at the pinnacle. Even time and space are praising their battle and giving them a certain amount of tributes. The epic geniuses are absolutely invincible existences in any era. In some eras, even if an entire era was used up, it would still be impossible to produce one. However, a total of 7 epic geniuses have appeared here. In addition to the human race's feather Yu Ronghua, the Emperor's father, the god-slayer Lu Tao, and the young underworld king who has been suppressed by the Emperor. The number of epic geniuses that have appeared in this era has already reached a shocking number of 10. Shocking, shocking, truly shocking. Countless people were at a loss for words. They knew that although they did not know if such a shocking scene would be repeated in the future, it was definitely unprecedented. This time, I wonder who will be the final victor. Some existences had already begun to think about who would be the final victor. At this moment, countless existences began to discuss. Among these people, the most optimistic ones were the epic geniuses of their own races. The second most optimistic ones were the Emperor's sons of the monarch races. As for Lu Feng, although Lu Feng was the one who started the battle, many people did not have high hopes for him. If the Emperor is at the same level as these people, even if he's just a level lower, a mere demigod of the 3rd level, then the final victory will definitely be his. After all, the Emperor is completely invincible among those in the same realm. Completely invincible. I'm afraid even immortal kings and demon kings are no match for him. However, it's a pity that although he started the battle this time, his realm is really too low. Although they are all epic geniuses, he is 3 levels higher than the others. He can't win. In many people's hearts, Lu Feng was not qualified to win at all. After all, his realm was too low. However, there were also some people who did not think so. They also had high hopes for Lu Feng. These people had seen Lu Feng's figure and had witnessed Lu Feng's miraculous and sacred existence. The Emperor's existence is not something you can imagine or surmise. Since he chose to start the battle at such a time, it proves that he has absolute confidence in Emperor Lu Feng. Below the stage, countless discussions had caused the entire world to boil. When they saw this scene, no one stepped forward to stop it, because even the almighty experts of the King realm had fallen into the same discussion. In their hearts, they were also discussing who the final victor would be. Unfortunately, the human race was not included in this discussion. As he looked at the boiling crowd, a smile spread across the North Palace ancestral ancestor's face. They have never seen the Emperor in battle, so they will never understand the terror of the Emperor. When they heard the North Palace ancestral ancestor's words, many of the human race's existences thought of the past, of Lu Feng's incomparably terrifying scene. Many almighties gently nodded their heads. They had all more or less seen Lu Feng in battle, and many of them had even witnessed Lu Feng's battle of the sacred remains. Vaguely, they seemed to recall a moment in the past, when Lu Feng completed the world-shaking sacred miracle and executed the greatest annihilation that made the universe tremble. 1,000,000,000 mortals, 1,000,000,000 immortals. I wonder if I'll be able to see it again this time. 8,000,000,000 mortals, 1,000,000,000 immortals. This was a terrifying ultimate move that made even the almighty experts tremble in fear. They understood that Lu Feng's current level was still too low. If he became a 9th or 10th layer virtual king like them one day, what kind of shocking phenomenon would he create when he executed this move? I'm afraid that the battle prowess displayed by the Emperor at that time was even more terrifying than the ultimate killing move of the Divine King when he entered the Divine King's forbidden mythological forbidden domain. Everyone fell silent. Although they were unwilling to believe it, it was the truth. That kind of fatal blow was really too shocking, and it had already reached an indescribable level. They had no choice but to believe it. All right, it's about to begin. I wonder who the Emperor's first opponent will be. At the beginning, everyone thought there would at most be 4 monstrous geniuses. Who would have thought that there would be 6 of them? Lu Feng's opponent this time was none other than the 6 monstrous geniuses. This would be the most difficult and violent battle he had ever fought since he started his cultivation journey. A figure slowly walked out of the medicine god domain, as if to complement the words of this mighty figure of the human race. He stepped into the void and catered to the unusual movement of heaven and earth. His existence was the melody of the era. His unparalleled existence reflected time and space. The Emperor. Yes, Emperor. At this moment, as soon as someone called out Lu Feng's title, the place instantly fell silent. Then, a sound that seemed like the sky was falling and the earth was cracking rang out, causing the entire space to constantly tremble. The Emperor! He's here! The #1 monstrous genius of all time, the #1 talent in endless time and space. He surpassed the primogenitor human king and became an invincible existence above the overlord of an era. Whether he can fulfill all the promises he made in the past will depend on this battle. If he fails, he'll fall from the altar and become a stepping stone for other monstrous geniuses to reach the peak. If he succeeds, then he'll truly be invincible. He'll really achieve great success and become unstoppable. Everyone understood that it would be fine if Lu Feng was defeated. However, if he won, then he'd be truly invincible. After winning, Lu Feng would become an invincible existence. He'd truly surpass the primogenitor human king. Is it about to begin? In the Tiandao races camp, a young elite opened his eyes. Divine light surged in his eyes. His aura had completely recovered at this moment. Emperor, I'll return the defeat you gave me in the past to you today. I hope you won't be defeated in the hands of others and cause me to lose the chance to take revenge. The Tiandao crown prince slowly stood up. In an instant, a shocking phenomenon appeared in the void. It was the illusory image of the Yellow Springs plate. That was the appearance of an invincible power. I've waited for too long. Emperor, your reputation has become a legend and a miracle. Then, today, let me shatter the legend and kill the miracle, Imperial Prince. This was the Imperial Prince. Endless Imperial Dynasty's noble aura surrounded him. He was the most heaven-defying monstrous genius in the history of the monarch race. Now, he was finally going to bare his sharp fangs. Chapter 722. Space-time was in turmoil. It was real turmoil in space-time. Although the 7 people who had appeared were not even celestial gods, they were all geniuses of an era. In any era, in any epoch, he was the strongest talent that no one else could compare to. Now that they were in the same era, this was something no one could have imagined. Therefore, their appearance really caused a turmoil in an era. The complicated clamor and the shocking discussions had completely disappeared. Everyone was silent because they were paying attention to the arrival of the greatest moment in the void. 6 shocking phenomena appeared in the camps of the 6 peak overlords. In the next moment, 6 figures rose into the sky. Like Lu Feng, they stepped on the void and walked toward the incomparably vast battle platform step by step. Finally, under the gazes of billions of people, the 7 figures appeared at the same time and stepped onto the platform at the same time. Vaguely, everyone seemed to hear an ancient battle song. It was a terrifying battle song that had appeared at an unknown time and place. It made everyone's blood boil. This is the battle song of an era. Legend has it that this melody will only appear when the geniuses of an era collide for the final time. It seems like even the universe's origin acknowledges that these 7 people are the greatest existences of this era. When heavenly venerate Netherworld became the overlord of an era, the ancient battle song had not appeared. When the great demonic Sky Emperor became the overlord of an era, the battle song had not existed. When the first divine king had awakened and was about to become the overlord of the sky, it was still the same. The ancient battle song would only appear when the human king became truly invincible. However, the battle song at that time had only sounded because of the human king's appearance. The grandeur of the battle song was far from comparable to the current one. This time, it was the true battle song of an era. It was a battle song that sounded for the peak geniuses under the starry sky. Countless people fell silent. They were all paying attention, and they were all extremely nervous as they looked at the 7 people who were looking at each other on the platform. Lu Feng looked at the Emperor's son, a true peerless enemy. His eyes were incomparably calm. However, if one were to look closely, it wouldn't be difficult to see that there was a slight flickering light in the depths of Lu Feng's eyes. The Crown Prince was not that difficult to distinguish. Among the 6 monstrous geniuses present, Lu Feng knew about the 31st Prince and the Heavenly Tao Crown Prince. As for the remaining 4 Supreme Kings, they all had their own unique characteristic. The Crown Prince's attire gave off the feeling of a Crown Prince of a dynasty. Moreover, the noble aura he gave off was incomparable. Therefore, Lu Feng recognized the Crown Prince at a glance. Hearing Lu Feng's words, the Emperor's son smiled faintly. He was also incomparably silent, but a terrifying fighting spirit also appeared in the depths of his eyes. Emperor, I'm the Imperial Prince, you're the Emperor, we're destined to fight. Emperor's son was also the title of Emperor. Originally, he should have been able to become a titled Emperor. Although he wasn't a taboo king with his combat strength, he should have been able to become a titled Emperor. However, Lu Feng had already been recognized by the entire universe. Therefore, if he wanted to obtain the title of Emperor, he had to defeat Lu Feng. Evidently, the Crown Prince was planning to do the same. Monarch, your monarch title, this time, I will accept it. As he spoke, he was incomparably indifferent, without the slightest trace of anger. Everything was as noble and flawless as his identity. Lu Feng chuckled, not taking it seriously at all. He looked at the people around him. Soon, he recognized the other 3 Supreme Kings. The Spirit King of the Sky Race, the High Priest of the War God Race, and the Sky Demon Saint of the Sky Demon Race. The 3 Supreme Kings represented the most terrifying inheritances of the 3 pinnacle Overlord races. They did not shrink back at such a moment because they had their own pride in their hearts. They firmly believed that they were the true invincible existences. They wanted to break through the last shackle and become the true invincible existences. They would not fail. The Spirit King was the youngest existence among them, second only to Lu Feng. His eyes were overflowing with fighting spirit, and he did not hide it at all. The High Priest had always been incomparably serene, as if he was an extremely old existence, filled with the brilliance of wisdom. The Celestial Demon Saint was the epitome of insolence. His violence was the most intense among all of them. His incomparably terrifying aura caused the stars to tremble, and it made people tremble. The 6 of them represented the 6 ultimate state. At this moment, their performance was the pinnacle of the monstrous geniuses in the endless time and space. The battle they were about to begin was the most terrifying battle of the pinnacle. The battle was about to begin in an instant. Lu Feng stood in the middle of the 6 monstrous geniuses, but he did not reveal any majesty. Everyone was looking at him, including the 6 monstrous geniuses. They were waiting for Lu Feng to choose his opponent for the first battle of the King's Battle. Finally, when Lu Feng swept his gaze across everyone, it stopped on the 31st Prince. The 31st Prince had 4 supreme powers, and he had almost ignited his divine fire. He had the most complete and powerful blood mark in the history of the Serene blood tribe. His strength was at the peak of the 6 monstrous geniuses. Many people were optimistic about him, believing that he was the most likely existence to compete with the Emperor's son for the final Emperor's Tao. Who would have thought that the first person Lu Feng looked at and the first person he chose would be one of the most terrifying existences in the world? In the next moment, the 31st Prince smiled. With a light step, he had already arrived in front of Lu Feng. His eyes were filled with an undisguised, terrifying will. Previously, he was incomparably indifferent because Lu Feng did not choose him. But now, when Lu Feng decided that he would be his first opponent, the 31st Prince could no longer maintain that indifferent expression. Monarch, back in the great desolate totem, I trembled because of your shocking existence. Now I have reached the peak of my current stage. If you want to fight, then I will fight with you. His terrifying aura had already begun to fluctuate, tearing the starry sky apart. At this moment, the remaining 5 monstrous geniuses turned around and left the battle platform in the blink of an eye. Although they also hoped to be Lu Feng's opponent, Lu Feng did not choose them. Therefore, it was time for them to leave. The 5 monstrous geniuses floated quietly in the void, looking down at the 2 unparalleled figures on the battle platform from afar. They had conflicting expressions of calmness and madness. Monarch, I hope I can fight with you in the future. I hope you won't fail. Every monstrous genius had their own trump cards. They all believed that they were invincible. In their hearts, only they were a match for Lu Feng. Only they could truly fight with Lu Feng. Let's fight. Let me see why you dare to initiate the final battle when you are 3 realms lower than us. On the battle stage, the 2 invincible existences were quietly staring at each other. The surrounding space was completely silent. No one dared to say a word. They were afraid of affecting the 2 on the battle stage and causing any deviation in their battle. This is the pinnacle battle of an era. It's also the final battle of the monstrous geniuses in the endless space-time. I wonder who will win this time? Will the monarch continue his journey of miracles, or will the 31st Prince shatter the void and kill the miracle? Everyone communicated through telepathy because they didn't dare to influence anything. On the battle platform, Lu Feng did not make a move. He only watched quietly and waited. The 31st Prince did the same. They were both quietly observing each other. If they were at the same realm, Lu Feng would not have waited. He would have used the most violent means to suppress his opponent in an instant. However, things were different now. His current opponent was the 31st Prince, who was 3 realms higher than him. Therefore, he had to wait. He had to wait until his essence, energy, and spirit had entered the peak state before making a move. The 31st Prince did not make a move either. He had made the same choice as Lu Feng. Even though Lu Feng's cultivation was lower than his, Lu Feng's reputation was built on the accumulation of countless monstrous geniuses. He did not want to become a stepping stone on Lu Feng's mythical path. Therefore, he had to be cautious. After watching Lu Feng quietly, the 31st Prince finally spoke. Monarch, I really did not expect that you would choose such a time to initiate the final battle when the Battle of the Kings is still in its early stages. The Battle of the Kings has appeared more than 10 times. However, there has never been a battle like this one. The 31st Prince looked at Lu Feng and sighed slightly. Originally, they had intended to wait until all of them had become virtual king before engaging in the clash between the Supreme Kings. However, Who would have thought that Lu Feng would actually make such a shocking decision and issue a challenge to the countless geniuses of the entire universe at the same time? As supreme kings, how could they be afraid? Therefore, although they did not understand, did not want to, and were unwilling to, they had still come here to challenge Lu Feng. Upon seeing the 31st Prince's slightly silent expression, Lu Feng just laughed. It was a kind of unbridled, crazy, and unrestrained laughter. Lu Feng's smile was puzzling and confusing. Billions of people were watching. They really did not understand why Lu Feng was behaving this way. In the next moment, Lu Feng began to scan the crowd. His eyes kept moving as he scanned everything. The Sky Dao Crown Prince, the Emperor's son, Feather Gloom Ronghua, the High Priestess, the Spirit King, the Sky Demon Saint. One by one, almost all of the monstrous geniuses and even geniuses were captured in Lu Feng's eyes. Everyone who met Lu Feng's gaze felt a slight tremor. This was because they saw an indescribably crazy look in his eyes. Under such an expression, they actually felt a kind of tremor and palpitations. As monstrous geniuses of this era, as the peak of the peak demigods, as extremely terrifying existences, when had they ever been afraid of the eyes of others? However, at this moment, when they looked at Lu Feng, they were really frightened. They could not suppress the panic in their hearts. In the end, his gaze finally stopped on the 31st Prince in front of him. Everyone's attention was focused. They were waiting for Lu Feng's explanation. Lu Feng did not disappoint them. In the next moment, Lu Feng's voice slowly rang out. The final showdown of the Battle of the Kings has been brought forward because of one thing. Countless people had already stopped breathing. Even the almighties of the various major races were the same. They really wanted to hear what Lu Feng had to say. Lu Feng's smile became even more dazzling and terrifying. That is, if you give me more time, you won't even be qualified to resist me. Now, all of you have entered a peak. This is the moment when you are truly the closest to me. If you wait any longer, even if you are a supreme monarch, you still won't be a match for me. If you don't fight now, you won't have any more chances in the future. If you don't fight now, you won't have any more chances in the future. This was Lu Feng's intention. This was the real reason why Lu Feng had chosen to fight at this moment. Countless people wanted to scold him for his arrogance. This was the era of the War of the Kings. This was the most glorious era of the War of the Kings since the beginning of history. No other era could compare with it. Here, the number of supreme kings with the most terrifying power had gathered. In the past, any one of them was the most likely existence to become the ultimate king. But now, someone actually dared to say such words. This was simply indescribable with the word arrogant. Chapter 723. However, no one could say anything when they saw the figure on the battle platform in the endless void. From the very beginning, that figure had always been incomparably humble, but he was also endlessly arrogant. Once upon a time, before he became a martialist, he had said that he would surpass the first taboo king, the human king. Although he had not succeeded yet, it was just a matter of time. Many of the things he had done had already shown that he, Emperor Lu Feng, really had the power to surpass the human king. Countless battles, including the master of the Six Tao, the perfect stage, and the true gods. Which one of them was not the most heaven-defying existence? Which one of them was not the most terrifying? He had done it. He had done it all. And now it was the same. When he said those words, no one in the vast space-time, countless living beings, billions of geniuses and monstrous geniuses could refute or deny them. They only remained silent and pondered. The 31st Prince sighed. In fact, the most powerful people Lu Feng had targeted were the supreme kings, the monstrous geniuses of this era. However, at this moment, as someone who understood Lu Feng very well, he really could not say anything. The 31st Prince still remembered that in the past, during the Great Desolate Totem Inheritance, Lu Feng's incomparably crazy posture and figure that did not retreat in the slightest in the face of anything. Lu Feng had left a deep impression on him at that moment. He really did not dare to doubt the authenticity of Lu Feng's words. Therefore, at this moment, when Lu Feng said those words, he really went completely silent. He was completely speechless. After a long time, the 31st prince smiled bitterly. "Emperor, your words are really a little shocking." Lu Feng's smile did not change, but it had become gentler. "The younger generation is a crazy generation. Just as one of my companions once said, if we are not crazy and do not worship, can we still be considered the younger generation? Your Excellency, am I wrong?" The 31st prince was silent. He was extremely silent. He knew that Lu Feng was right. He was absolutely right. They had cultivated countless times ahead of Lu Feng, but now they were gradually being overtaken by Lu Feng. If not for the fact that Lu Feng had only become a first-tier demigod during the trip to the ruins, and if not for the fact that Lu Feng had been suppressing his cultivation base for the past 3 months, they might not have been a match for Lu Feng. This was an ironic scene, a desolate scene. Their strength was publicly acknowledged by the world. Even in the boundless space and time, they were great and supreme existences that could be ranked at the forefront. In the future, becoming the Divine King was nothing difficult. But now, when facing Lu Feng, he felt so helpless and desolate. "It's really sad to be born in the same era as you. I hate the heavens for allowing me to live in the same world as the king." This was what the past said about the era of the Man-King. It was the common lamentation of many demons, geniuses, and even the Supreme King, the Divine King. At this moment, we of the younger generation have already experienced such pain and helplessness. This was an unprecedented situation of prosperity. Everyone had already felt it. However, in this era where evildoers ran rampant, such a desolate and tragic scene had appeared. This was really the biggest punishment for them. Looking at Lu Feng, the 31st prince gently shook his head. His eyes became incomparably dazzling at this moment. At this moment, an endless aura surged, shaking the heavens and shaking the time. 4 types of power, and the power of the blood tattoo, had appeared, making him far more powerful than 4 types of power. He was almost on the same level as 5 types of power. Add that to the fact that he was at the peak of the demigod realm, and the 31st prince was displaying the domineering majesty of someone who could slay gods and exterminate devils. Looking at Lu Feng, the 31st prince's voice resounded completely at this moment. "Emperor, since you are so domineering, then let's fight. Let me see if you now have the power to make us submit and tremble." The 31st prince had already entered the peak of his life. Facing Lu Feng, he could not have any hesitation or reservation. Young Netherworld Monarch was the best example. If he had used the ultimate invincible power right from the start, then even if Lu Feng could win, he would have had to pay the heaviest price. It could be said that the biggest reason for young Netherworld Monarch's failure, besides Lu Feng's strength, was his reservation and his calculations. Naturally, with young Netherworld Monarch as an example, these Supreme Kings would not make such a mistake again. Therefore, the 31st prince was completely shaken. All of them displayed the most terrifying power. Lu Feng didn't hold back when he faced the 31st prince, who was using the power of the blood mark and had 4 supreme powers. The 31st prince had reached his limit. If he had not reached his limit, then he would have been completely suppressed in an instant. Lu Feng still wanted to continue his mythical path and enter the final realm to become another existence, or even an existence that surpassed him. Therefore, how could he fail? In the next moment, all 7 supreme powers appeared. At this moment, countless visions rendered the sky and shook the air. Many existences had heard that Lu Feng had 7 supreme powers, but they had never seen them before. Now, this was the first time they saw it. They were really frightened. What a terrifying supreme power! The entire space-time is shaking. These 7 supreme powers are definitely the pinnacle, or even beyond the pinnacle of supreme powers. No wonder the Emperor has such confidence and dares to challenge all existences in this realm. Horror and trembling were the only feelings in the hearts of many existences at this moment. Finally, after completing the addition of the 7 supreme powers, the boundless visions began to tremble. The Eternal One Emperor of True Self appeared. Surrounded by all the invincible visions, he became the eternal ruler. His face was Lu Feng's face. His existence was the reflection of Lu Feng. He was the great Emperor Lu Feng. Heavenly connecting Fudu was so mysterious. After going through 3 openings, it had begun to embody the true power of power. A hazy power passed through the phantom and blessed Lu Feng's body, causing Lu Feng's power to skyrocket. The current Lu Feng, after upgrading all his power, entered the peak of the 7th rank monarch realm. He instantly shattered the shackles between gods and true gods, becoming a beginner true god. But the manifestation of his power, his terrifying aura, was truly comparable to any high-level true god. Opposite him was the 31st prince, who had become a high-level true god. The two of them looked at each other, speechless. They were both accumulating their invincible power, preparing for the start of the final battle between the heavens and earth. In the end, the 31st prince did not hold on until the end. For him, facing Lu Feng was a psychological disadvantage. If this continued, he would be completely suppressed by Lu Feng in terms of aura. The 31st prince understood that although his true realm was higher than Lu Feng lies by 3 small realms, the difference in their true strength was endless. Once the battle started, the side with the stronger aura would be crushed instantly. He could not tolerate such a situation. Monarch, this is the starting point of my final battle, but it will definitely not be the end. So let's fight. In an instant, the sky darkened, causing time and space to dim. A shocking killing intent had appeared. The power of the blood trace behind him was condensed to the extreme, triggering the invincible power of the nether heavenly venerate. Everyone was shocked because at this moment, time and space were dyed in a blood-red color. The power of the blood trace can dye everything. When everything becomes a sea of red, it proves that everything no longer exists. The entire battle stage, which was comparable to a second-grade life planet, was dyed in a blood-red color in an instant. Although the appearance did not change, everyone could feel the extremely deep killing intent within this red color. In the entire venue, the only one who could remain unchanged was Lu Feng. The monarch's radiance in his body was constantly revolving. No matter how the blood-red color covered the heavens and earth, it could not affect his power in the slightest. This time, it seems like many monstrous geniuses have learned their lesson from the fall of the young underworld monarch. They have used their ultimate power right from the start. The power of the blood trace was undoubtedly the most terrifying and unparalleled power. Once it was used, it meant that the serene blood tribe had reached their limit. The final result would be either you die or I live. Blood dyed the sky and death soared. Endless darkness began to cover the area. This was the ultimate use of the dark essence. The 31st prince was ready to use his final trump card. Dark Dynasty. This was a mutated Dark Dynasty. Apart from the endless darkness, there were also countless intertwining blood-red colors within the dynasty. Without a doubt, this mutation was even more terrifying and extreme. It made people's hearts tremble. The surrounding spacetime was actually gradually melting away. The surrounding mysteries were actually in a state of emptiness. Everyone knew that this was the corrosion of the darkness. The blood-red color had already reached its limit. Even those illusory existences were starting to be destroyed. Finally, the 31st prince had turned into the Dark Emperor. With a raise of his hand, the heavens and earth would collapse. A battle between monarchs. This is a true battle between monarchs. At first, I thought that such a battle between two monarchs or monarchs would only occur when monarchs and monarchs fought. Who would have thought that the 31st prince would also condense such a monarch intent? An emperor sacred venerate. Actually, when you think about it, it makes sense. He is the 31st prince, the true successor of the serene blood dynasty. His monarch aura is incomparably dense. Although the 31st prince was only the 31st prince, the true almighties of the serene blood tribe all understood that the 31st prince was the true successor of the serene blood dynasty. He was the next divine king of the serene blood tribe. Although he had spent his childhood in complete silence, the hope that he had been given was incomparable to that of any other prince. This had also allowed him to develop the true monarch aura. His eyes extinguished, sinking into death, defying the heavens and surviving by killing the heavens. This was the Dark Emperor that the 31st prince had transformed into. Chapter 724. Lu Feng's expression was indifferent. He was still the same as before. When he was dyed in blood, he didn't move at all. When he was covered in darkness, he was still calm. Now, when the 31st prince used his trump card and turned into the Dark Emperor, he finally showed a different expression. This was a kind of turbulence, an indescribable color of turbulence. Emperor, between heaven and earth, one is enough. Between heaven and earth, there could only be one eternal emperor, and that was Lu Feng. Emperor Lu Feng. With his invincible will burning, Lu Feng finally made his move. In an instant, the supreme power of the emperor stirred and turned into the phantom of a supreme emperor. He walked in the void, holding up the sky and killing the earth, suppressing everything. When a supreme power is comprehended to a very deep level, one can summon the source of this supreme power. In other words, it is the ultimate existence. Once a supreme power is comprehended to the limit, this ultimate state will descend. In the past, we were also puzzled about what this so-called monarch force was. After all, even if the sovereigns of the immortal Devil Age evolved their own supreme forces, they were at most at the pinnacle of supreme forces. However, the monarch power that the monarch emperor used, this kind of unprecedented supreme power, already belongs to the category of supreme power. It is really too frightening. Most supreme powers were naturally formed, such as the power of thunder and lightning, or the power of destruction. These were all born from the laws of nature, or the power of the universe's origin. However, some supreme powers could be condensed through some powerful forces. Once the bloodline inheritance of an epic overlord was condensed to the limit, it was a supreme power. However, it belonged to the lowest level of supreme power. For example, the minor Six Paths power that the Master of Six Paths imitated the Six Paths reincarnation to condense was a beginner supreme power. The supreme power formed by the bloodline inheritance of a supreme ruler was a peak supreme power. For example, Lu Feng's human monarch bloodline was a peak supreme power. However, Lu Feng's emperor's power of the emperor was something no one had ever heard of or seen before. This was actually a supreme power that surpassed the realm of the pinnacle. It was a supreme power that could only be formed by the greatest of powers. It's a supreme power that surpasses the pinnacle, such as the immortal power, the power of the origin of the endless great devils, or the destructive power of the universe's origin. These are not things that can be formed by an individual. However, the monarch power that the monarch emperor uses is artificially condensed. Today we have finally seen the true body of the person who condensed the monarch power. Countless outsiders watched quietly, unable to conceal the shock in their eyes. They knew that the abnormal sign was a grand existence that had once surpassed the limits of the world. He had truly condensed a supreme power that surpassed the pinnacle. In the void, the great emperor truly existed. His roar caused the universe to tremble, and even time itself to tremble in fear. This was a true monarch. There was no need for any decorations. Just his existence alone was enough to cause the universe to tremble. The Emperor of Darkness was incomparably powerful. He was a supreme existence formed by the condensation of endless dark energy. However, in front of the true monarch of the universe, his gorgeous decorations and embellishments were so laughable. Everything that once made people feel solemn and dignified was a joke in front of the true monarch that Lu Feng had condensed. In an instant they collided. A true collision of the limits. No one had expected that these two invincible geniuses would use their most powerful trump cards right from the start. They directly transformed their power into the abnormal sign of a supreme power. One punch, just one punch, and time and space shattered. This kind of destructive collision caused those deities to retreat in fear. In the scene, countless true gods began to erect their strongest defenses. Countless gods had already hidden in the endless void, hiding their figures. Even the great heavenly gods had solemn expressions. They were slightly shaken, as if they were ready to erect their defenses at any time to resist the most terrifying killing blow. The only ones who could not take any measures in such a collision were the kings. However, even the king's eyes twitched slightly at this moment. They knew that although such power was far from enough to hurt them, they could already feel a sense of threat from this power. This was undoubtedly an indescribable scene. Two existences that aren't even gods are able to threaten us emperors? Ridiculous, ridiculous. Although they were saying it was ridiculous, there was a kind of helplessness and a kind of sadness in their eyes. To be able to become a virtual king, which one of them was not a peerless genius of their generation. However, at this moment, compared to these two people, all the glory was a joke. This was, in fact, a pity. In the void, the battle between the Emperor of the Universe and the Emperor of Darkness had progressed to a shocking degree. These two beings were ultimately evolved from the supreme power. It was the strongest collision of the two monstrous beings' essence, energy, and spirit. Originally, the Emperor of Darkness could not compete with the Emperor of the Universe. After all, one was only evolved from the initial supreme power of darkness, while the other was condensed from a supreme power that had surpassed the pinnacle. There was the most fundamental difference between the two of them. However, at this moment, because of the gap in their realms, the two great emperors were actually evenly matched. This was unexpected, but also expected. If the Emperor of the Universe had the fourth demigod realm, then the Emperor of the Universe would have been able to obliterate the Emperor of Darkness in an instant. But, what a pity, really a pity! Lu Feng stood in a distant place, quietly watching the other party. The 31st Prince, who was also incomparably indifferent, was a long distance away. For others, evolving a vision of the supreme power was already an all-out effort, but for these two people, it was nothing. The invincible vision evolved from the supreme power was indeed a killing blow of the trump card, but it was far from their only and only trump card. This was just a test of their trump card. In the next moment, an incomparable blood-red color surged, as if it was going to completely cover Lu Feng. Lu Feng did not wait. His battle was the ultimate violence. He wanted to use violence to shatter everything. This kind of battle that relied on visions and mystiques was not what he yearned for or accepted. Therefore, Lu Feng began his most terrifying killing blow. With a light kick, even space and time could be shattered. Such a scene shook the world. Is this the legendary ultimate fleshly body that still exists after going through 4 major tribulations? It has yet to achieve a supreme godly body, but its power is comparable to an ordinary existence that has condensed the sacred truth body. Such a physical body is enough to withstand any degree of the Emperor's terrifying killing blow. As if to verify the validity of this sentence, Lu Feng stepped on the endless space and time and appeared in front of the 31st Prince. A fist swept across the sky, shocking everyone. This was a shocking killing blow comparable to any 7th-grade artifact that had been activated to the limit. It was absolutely shocking. Even someone as strong as the 31st Prince did not dare to take such a blow head-on. Although his physical body was also comparable to any supreme godly body, there was still a big gap between it and Lu Feng's strongest fledgling form of battle constitution. Therefore, he retreated. The endless power of the blood marks bloomed, disturbing the void. An endless sea of blood surged, as if it wanted to completely annihilate Lu Feng. Such a degree made one feel like they were sinking into the sea of blood. However, it was not complete. Everything was far from complete. The 31st Prince's existence was a supreme king. At this moment, he had already let go of this battle and was going to fight crazily. How could he only have such a simple backup plan? Therefore, the moment the boundless sea of blood surged, the other three supreme powers were activated at the same time. The surging waves were earth-shattering. Lu Feng did not retreat. At this moment, the great demonic power had been activated to the limit, and the power of the human monarch's bloodline had also reached the peak. The combination of these two great powers, in addition to his invincible battle constitution, made Lu Feng not afraid of anything at all. The 31st Prince had activated three supreme powers. This was definitely a shocking scene. After all, his final trump card had just been used in the battle. Then, the following confrontation would be even more terrifying. However, were three types of supreme powers really that world-shaking? No. How could this be possible? Since you've used three, then I will completely suppress you and destroy you. Then I'll use 6. Of these 6 supreme powers, the weakest was at the peak of supreme power, and 3 of them were existences that surpassed one supreme power. At this moment, 6 supreme powers were activated at the same time. Power was shocking, and it was a terrifying output that was comparable to 8 or even 9 supreme powers. Without a doubt, even an existence like the Crown Prince did not expect Lu Feng to actually take all the killing blows head-on. He actually unleashed an even more terrifying killing blow in such a domineering and overbearing manner. The 31st Prince was sent flying. Both of them had activated their power to the limit. There was no holding back at all. Therefore, every killing blow was the most terrifying collision. The 31st Prince's body was seriously injured. The power of his bloodline surged and began to recover rapidly. However, everyone could still vaguely see a bright red color. This was definitely not a boundless dark red sea caused by the blood traces. It was real blood flowing. There was a faint depression on his body. If such a serious injury were to happen to other monsters, they would have already lost the ability to fight. Even if it happened to the 31st Prince, he was still injured. Lu Feng stood in the air and did not continue to attack. Although under such circumstances, if he continued to attack, the 31st Prince would be beaten to the point of collapse. However, he still did not do so. This was not because Lu Feng was holding back, but because he had no other choice. Although it was so terrifying, under the extreme killing of the 31st Prince, Lu Feng was still blocked, even if he was not seriously injured. Just like that, Lu Feng quietly floated in the air. Chapter 725. The vision of the Emperor bloomed behind him. The sky-piercing Futu was still mysterious and unknown, and the endless immortal and demon visions were still emerging. In the void, a large part of the world of blood traces had been cleared. After a while, the other battle had ended. At the final moment, the Emperor of the Universe threw out his strongest punch in anger, completely shattering the dark world. The battle between visions was just like the battle between Lu Feng and the 31st Prince. In the end, Lu Feng had the upper hand. Slowly, the 31st Prince rose into the air again and returned to his previous appearance. His body had become incomparably tall and straight again. His clothes fluttered in the wind, constantly swaying in the red world. Looking at Lu Feng, the 31st Prince's eyes were filled with an indescribable color. The two of them looked at each other quietly. After a long time, the 31st prince finally spoke slowly. Why, everyone was stunned when they heard this. Apart from the monstrous geniuses, the others were puzzled. They didn't understand why such a scene would occur. Lu Feng looked at the 31st prince and smiled. After a short silence, the 31st prince finally spoke again. You could have suppressed me completely just now. Why did you hold back? Many existences were even more puzzled. In the situation just now, Lu Feng could have suppressed the 31st prince completely if he had attacked again. However, Lu Feng had been restrained by the 31st prince's killing intent. He had no way of attacking at all. Just as many people were puzzled, some almighty existences seemed to have thought of something. Their expressions changed slightly. It was an extremely ugly expression. In the next moment, a voice was heard from the void. The Emperor is the Taboo King. These words were enough to explain. The Emperor was the Taboo King. As for the Taboo Monarchs, they were existences that stood above the unparalleled monarch. Everything was because they possessed unparalleled divine abilities. Lu Feng's supreme superpower was probably known by all existences in the universe. It was called the Twin Souls. The monarch twin souls shook the universe. At this point in the battle, everyone was already attracted by the shocking battle between the two of them. They had actually forgotten the existence of the two souls and Lu Feng's identity as the Taboo King. Thus, at this moment, they finally came to a realization. Indeed, if Lu Feng had used his two souls, the battle would have ended in an instant. Under the destructive sky, any existence would find it difficult to resist. Moreover, Lu Feng's limit was far from something that could be described by the firmament of destruction. If he really used his extreme power, he could even cause several heavens of destruction to descend at the same time. At that time, the 31st prince would not be able to resist at all. Everyone looked at the incomparably calm figure in the void, pondering the reason behind it. Lu Feng did not let the many existences wait for long. His voice finally sounded in the next moment. Because I don't want to, it's very simple. Everything is because I don't want to. There's no other reason. That's all. Everyone fell silent. At this moment, they finally understood the meaning behind Lu Feng's words. The monarch chose to challenge the monstrous geniuses of the other epochs who have ascended to the peak of the demigod realm. However, he is only a first-tier demigod. This is unfair in itself. However, he still did it. The reason for everything is because he wants to fight. He believes that if he really continues, these monstrous geniuses of the other epochs will lose the qualification to fight with him. This is what the monarch does not wish for. We all know that the monarch's speed of improvement is shocking. The other supreme kings cultivated for more than 10 years or even 20 years before they finally reached this level. However, the monarch, who has a more terrifying foundation and accumulation, completed it in just 2 years. If only a little more time, even if only a little more time, the monarch will catch up with all the other supreme kings in terms of realm. At that time, will there still be a need to fight? At that time, will there still be a need to fight? There was no need to even think about it. Facing the monstrous geniuses of the other epochs who were 3 levels higher than him, Lu Feng was still able to suppress them. If they were at the same level, then the supreme kings would not even be qualified to use their true power. In his eyes, in his heart, battle itself is a sacred thing. He doesn't fight just for the final victory. As an emperor, he enjoys the process of victory. Therefore, he would rather start the final battle when the supreme kings are the closest to him, when they have the highest chance of defeating him. That's his ultimate goal. Shock, admiration, jealousy, and even helplessness were intertwined. This was how everyone felt about Lu Feng's shocking appearance at this moment. In their eyes, Lu Feng's actions were stupid, but it was also a kind of madness, a kind of terror. If he didn't have such a fearless and unyielding heart, how could Lu Feng have reached where he was today? How could he have completed the obstacles and distances that others couldn't surpass in their entire lives in such a short period of time? This battle is enough. It is really enough. 31st Prince, your existence is not something those ordinary monstrous geniuses can compare to. Therefore, I hope to defeat you in the way of a true martialist. I don't want to rely on things that you don't have to force yourself to win. In this way, the meaning of the battle itself will be lost. The battle with the young underworld monarch was a battle of honor for their race. It was a battle of life and death. At that time, there was no bottom line. As long as they could win, everything would be fine. However, things were different now. This time, Lu Feng was the one who had initiated the final battle of the kings. His real purpose was to get to the bottom of this. He hoped to use these people to temper himself and save himself a lot of time so that he could directly enter the pinnacle of the demigod. If he relied on his two souls, Lu Feng was confident that other than the monarch, no one else would be a match for him. In that case, the meaning of the battle would be lost. Therefore, in this battle, Lu Feng gave up the supreme ability of his two souls. He chose to use his true body's power to fight and temper himself. Although they did not know Lu Feng's real thoughts, the supreme monarchs showed a look of admiration for Lu Feng's approach. In their hearts, victory was more important than anything else. In order to win, they could do a lot of things that exceeded their bottom line. They knew that if they had the same supreme ability as Lu Feng in such an occasion, they would definitely use it and not hold back. If they were to be like Lu Feng, giving up their greatest advantage and engaging in an uncertain battle in such an important competition, they would be doomed. They really could not do it. I am not as good as the monarch sighed. At this moment, he really admitted that he was not as good as Lu Feng. It was not a difference in strength, but a difference in state of mind. He really could not do such a thing. Although the other four supreme monarchs did not say anything, they all had the same expression on their faces. After all, they were just like the monarch prince and could not do it. As he looked at Lu Feng, the 31st Prince was filled with endless hot-bloodedness. Lu Feng's words were not a form of humiliation, but a form of respect. Only people who valued and respected battle would make such a decision. Monarch, if you want a duel between the purest martialists, I will give it to you. The boundless blood-red color converged, causing the space to tremble once again. Since you have made such a decision, I will not hesitate any longer. I will use my greatest strength. Regardless of whether I can continue or not, I will use my combat power that surpasses my limits in this clash with you. Supreme monarchs were called supreme monarchs because their existences were already above everything else. The king of massacre represented the pinnacle and the limit. However, supreme monarchs possessed power that surpassed this limit. When he heard Lu Feng's words, the 31st Prince finally let go of everything. In the past, when he had fought against Lu Feng, he had inevitably thought about the future and the opponents he would have to face if he defeated the monarch. Therefore, he could only use his power limit to fight back. He did not dare surpass his own limits. Once a supreme monarch uses a combat power that surpasses his own limits, the price he will have to pay will be even more terrifying than an ordinary existence using a supreme technique. It seems like the 31st Prince has already given up on all future duels. Only the monarch exists in his heart. In order to have a world-shaking battle with the monarch, he no longer thinks about anything else. The fact that the 31st Prince had used a power that surpassed his limits proved that he had already gambled everything on this battle. Wonderful, really wonderful. The boundless blood-red color converged to its limit. However, it did not dissipate. Instead, it all returned to the 31st Prince's body. A boundless sea of blood. This is the power of my blood mark. It is also my martial path embodiment. Previously, young Netherworld King had merged his martial Tao incarnation and the vision that he had condensed. This time, I will do the same. the young underworld monarch was in existence on the same level as them. In fact, his cultivation level was slightly lower than theirs. If he could do it, then naturally, the 31st Prince, who had comprehended 4 supreme powers, could do it too. My avatar is the underworld monarch. The underworld monarch was also a legendary existence. Like the underworld monarch, it belonged to the 2 great mythological systems. It was the ultimate existence that controlled death. The serene blood tribe and the underworld race were existences that opposed each other. They both worshipped death as their totems. The only difference was that the serene blood tribe worshipped a blood-red death. It was a process of death. On the other hand, the underworld race worshipped a world after death. One was the process, while the other was the result. And it was because of this that they were in 2 extremes, causing their beliefs to differ. Now, this was the clearest manifestation of this. The underworld monarch and the underworld monarch are both existences of the underworld. However, the process is different. One is the process of death, while the other is the result of death. I just don't know how different the world will be after the 2 avatars merge. The sea of blood finally returned to the body of the 31st Prince. At the moment, the 31st Prince had become a blood-red existence. Behind him, the underworld monarch had already appeared. However, in the next moment, he merged with the 31st Prince. In an instant, the 31st Prince's eyes were filled with mockery of death. It was a misconception of nirvana samsara. Everyone knew that the 31st Prince had become a new existence that had merged with the underworld monarch. His soul still belonged to the 31st Prince's soul, but his will was that of a great existence from the mythological era. The existence of the underworld is actually not a single existence. The one that controls the world after death is the underworld monarch. He is the underworld. The one that controls the process of death is the underworld monarch. He is also the underworld. The only difference is that the young underworld monarch's underworld monarch is simply an illusion. However, my underworld monarch is a process. Therefore, my existence is even more powerful. It is an existence that surpasses everything. The voice coming from his mouth was completely inhuman. It was hollow, sinister, cold, and filled with countless negative emotions. Anyone who heard it would feel as if they had fallen into a bottomless abyss. It would be hard for them to feel confident. The 31st Prince raised his head and looked at Lu Feng with the same terrifying eyes. Then, his voice rang out again. Emperor, enjoy the feast of death. He disappeared. The 31st Prince had actually disappeared completely the moment his voice rang out. No trace of his disappearance could be seen. It was incomparably frightening. What an astonishing speed! Countless Almighties sighed. This speed had already exceeded the limits of a true god. After completing the merging of the avatars, the 31st Prince's speed seemed to have crossed 3 huge levels. He had reached a speed that only sky's celestial existences could achieve. In the next moment, the underworld monarch that the 31st Prince had transformed into appeared beside Lu Feng. Chapter 726. The gloomy world had descended in an instant, and a strong killing intent had appeared. Just when everyone thought that Lu Feng was going to be severely injured, Lu Feng threw out an equally incredible blow from an impossible angle. Collision, an earth-shattering collision. The collision of the fists of the 2 invincible existences was even more shocking than the collision of the anomalies just now. It was unbearable. Both figures were sent flying backward, and both of them were injured to a certain extent. At this moment, after becoming an underworld venerable, the 31st Prince's power had increased tremendously. However, he had forgotten about Lu Feng's existence, which was not something that could be imagined with common sense. Others might not have been able to avoid such a terrifying killing intent, but that did not mean that Lu Feng could not. His speed was equally shocking, and his will to fight was incomparable to anyone else. Therefore, not only did he discover it, but he also avoided it, and he also threw out a collision blow. In the void there was an endless shock. At this moment, countless existences who were paying attention to the battle suddenly rose up and began to flee in all directions. Although this battle stage was built with a ninth-grade divine object, there were no protective measures around the battle stage. Therefore, the moment those terrifying power appeared, if they did not take any defensive measures, they would be subjected to an absolutely terrifying killing intent. Just the collision of two invincible existences, and just the aftershocks were enough to annihilate the Supreme. Almost all existences in the true God realm would not be able to survive such a terrifying annihilation. Therefore, when they felt such a terrifying collision, some almighty existences still took action. In an instant, the turbulence in the world was stabilized, and all the chaos was stopped. The virtual King Almighty was far beyond the level of Lu Feng. After all, it was an expert who had condensed a world. When it took action, it could completely stabilize the void. Moreover, this time, it was not just one virtual King Almighty who took action. In the field, there were thousands of virtual kings, and any one of them was enough to stabilize everything. More than 20 virtual King Almighty took action, completely sealing off the entire battle stage, so that everyone could continue to watch without worry. Below the battle platform, many gods and other beings who had left slowly returned. No one wanted to give up on such an epic battle. However, they cherished their lives even more. These people knew that if they didn't leave just now, they would die. They weren't idiots enough to give up their lives for a confrontation. However, things were different now. With 20 virtual King Almighties attacking together, their safety would be guaranteed. No one could doubt that. However, when they looked at the arena again, they were almost stunned. It had only been a few moments, but the confrontation had already reached its peak. Vaguely, there were countless scars on their bodies. Terrifying blood filled the void. In the world that had returned to its previous color, the color of the blood was even more dazzling, causing people's hearts to tremble. These are the blood of the most powerful monsters. Only a monster could make a monster bleed. This was a theorem, because no one else was qualified to do so. Lu Feng's body was covered with mottled scars. It was extremely miserable and indescribable. However, his condition was still at its peak. Within his pupils, there was still a terrifying and crazy aura. This scene made people wonder if Lu Feng would never fall. His opponent, the 31st prince who had transformed into Ming Zun, had become a great existence in the mythological era. However, when faced with Lu Feng, an existence that could even crush a mythological being, he had no way to deal with him. This battle had really caused the world to lose its color, time to lose its light, and time to dim. Both of them had the same idea and were using the same method. They both hoped to grind each other down to the lowest possible state through endless battles. That would be the moment when the most terrifying killing intent would appear. It was only at such a time that one could truly use supreme power to inflict serious damage on the opponent. Otherwise, by relying on the terrifying accumulation of these monsters and their shocking recovery abilities, ordinary obliterations simply wouldn't be effective. Lu Feng's monarch power was once again concentrated in the vast sky. This time, he directly used the power of his trump card. 6 shocking visions were evolved in the void. These were the extreme evolutions of the 6 great supreme powers. In the face of this, the 31st prince who had transformed into Ming Zun didn't have any color. Coldness and bloodthirstiness were still the main theme. He was Ming Zun, which was different from the underworld monarch. During the mythological era, he controlled the process of death. Therefore, his combat strength was unparalleled. Ming Zun's massacre was a feast of blood. In the face of Lu Feng's terrifying 6 great visions, what the 31st prince did was to create a boundless sea of blood. It surged and destroyed everything. In an instant, an even more terrifying blood-colored kingdom appeared, covering endless time and space. Even the spectators felt their hearts tremble as they felt the terror of death. The terrifying sea of blood instantly engulfed everything within it. The 6 shocking visions kept attacking and destroying everything. There was no need to doubt their strength. Any one of them was unparalleled in the current era. Unfortunately, Lu Feng's cultivation level was still too low. In the face of the 31st prince, who was 3 cultivation levels higher than him, the 6 great visions simply couldn't unleash that kind of terrifying power. Therefore, Lu Feng was ultimately defeated in the instant of confrontation. Of course, the boundless sea of blood had also become much thinner in the end. In the void, the confrontation between the 2 invincible existences had finally come to an end. The 2 of them stood on opposite ends of the sky, panting slightly. The power of their bloodlines began to surge continuously, restoring their condition. The eyes of the 31st prince, who had transformed into Ming Zun, were gradually turning red. He looked at Lu Feng and spoke in a cold voice again. My boundless sea of blood is one of my most terrifying powers. I didn't expect that even after using such a power, I still wouldn't be able to suppress you. It's just your martial cultivation level. Emperor, you're really going to be invincible. In the past, Lu Feng was invincible because of the existence of his 2 souls. When the 2 souls were activated, it was equivalent to 2 unparalleled kings attacking one person at the same time. Any one of Lu Feng's clones was enough to terrify the world. When the 2 clones moved together, the effect was absolutely terrifying. Therefore, at that time, Lu Feng was an invincible existence. However, now Lu Feng was actually able to have such absolute dominance and strength with just his martial cultivation level. This made countless geniuses gasp for breath and start to be shocked. Lu Feng's eyes were still as indifferent as before. He didn't say anything. He just looked at the 31st prince crazily. It seemed that in the world, apart from the 31st prince, there was nothing else that could arouse his interest. Taking a deep breath, the 31st prince sensed that he had almost recovered to his peak state. Then, he went on a killing spree. Although the 2 of them weren't mortal enemies, the 31st prince still felt a little grateful to Lu Feng because of his experience in the totem of the Great Wilderness. However, at this moment, everything else was in vain. Although the Battle of the Kings had not started for long, everyone knew the meaning of this battle. This was the true final battle. The winner would have the qualifications to step into the Emperor's realm. As for the loser, even if he became the Divine King, he was still destined to be a foil. In the endless time and space, there could only be one winner on the path of martial arts. There was no second place in martial arts. This was the truth. Panting lightly, Lu Feng faced the 31st prince's comeback without a trace of fear. His strength came from his heart, and his combat strength came from his own will. Therefore, Lu Feng attacked again. I am the Emperor! I am the Emperor! Everything, regardless of whether you are the supreme underworld venerate who is in charge of the process of death or the shocking prince with the bloodline inheritance of an overlord of an era, will have to submit to me. It had fused with all of Lu Feng's essence, energy, and spirit, as well as his will and belief. This time, I am the Emperor, and I will make everything in the world submit to me. Even the virtual king felt a kind of spiritual pressure at this moment. How is this possible? We all know the Emperor's background. He has only been in the world for 2 years. How can his imperial aura be so strong? How can his aristocratic will be so shocking? Even if he is the supreme overlord who created the universe dynasty, he shouldn't have such an indomitable imperial aura at such a young age. The virtual king couldn't believe it. Even the supreme overlord of an era shouldn't have such an imperial aura. Right now, Lu Feng's strength was still too weak. If one day he became a life and death quasi-king, then he wouldn't need to fight at all. Just by relying on his Supreme Emperor aura, he would be able to make everyone lose their ability to fight and surrender at his feet. In the distance, the 31st Prince was also affected by the same thing. However, he was now the Supreme Underworld Venerate, a legendary supreme god who was in charge of the process of death. As the Supreme Overlord, his existence was incomparably terrifying. His will was even more heaven-defying, making the world tremble. Although he was affected, it didn't make him lose any of his combat strength. Blood Demon Realm. The power of the Blood Demon came from blood and belonged to the forbidden power of blood. In the face of Lu Feng's shocking attack, the 31st Prince no longer held anything back. The forbidden power of the Serene Blood, which belonged to the royal family of the Serene Blood, began to appear. The boundless sea of blood provided the best soil for the birth of the Blood Demon Realm. In an instant, countless ferocious and terrifying blood demons were born in the boundless sea of blood. They roared crazily and charged toward Lu Feng without fear of death. The existence of any blood demon is enough to easily wipe out a deity. The number of blood demons that have appeared has already reached millions. As long as the sea of blood doesn't end, the blood demons won't die out. As long as the sea of blood exists, the countless blood demons will never disappear. Once the Emperor is entangled, there will be no chance of victory. The combination of the Blood Demon Realm and the 31st Prince's boundless sea of blood is simply an invincible massacre. Chapter 727. Everyone was shocked. They seemed to have seen the grand scene of the 31st Prince slaughtering an entire dynasty by himself. Finally, there was contact. Lu Feng's emperor's figure was instantly annihilated by countless blood demons. After a long time, just when everyone thought that Lu Feng had been completely obliterated by the blood demons, an ancient and desolate pulse appeared in this endless blood color. It was the rhythm of heaven and earth, a kind of engraving of time. Emperor's Move. Emperor's Move. This was the most invincible killing move that Lu Feng created based on his Emperor's aptitude after the Emperor's Move and the Emperor's Move. In the past, there were 3 moves in the Emperor's Move chapter of the Human King Manual, and the last move was the Emperor's Move. However, the Human King was ultimately just a human king. He, Lu Feng, was an emperor. Perhaps he would use the Emperor's Move and the Emperor's Move, but Lu Feng would never use the Emperor's Move. Because the Emperor's Move merged with the essence of the human king's will. He, Lu Feng, was an emperor. It was his own emperor's figure. It was impossible for him to imitate another king. The Emperor's Move was truly like the Emperor of the 9 heavens descending to the mortal world. With a wave of his hand, the era shook, heaven and earth shattered, and the sun and moon vanished. With just a light lift of his hand, he actually extinguished this endless blood-colored world of time, causing the boundless sea of blood to vanish completely. Horrifying! Horrifying! No one expected that Lu Feng would choose such a violent confrontation when facing the endless blood demons. He would choose such an extreme collision. A punch across the sky, annihilating countless. Endless. Lu Feng's eyes were so bright. In front of him, the incomparable sea of blood was still constantly producing endless blood demons, but Lu Feng had no intention of stopping it. At this moment, his voice resounded through heaven and earth. No matter how many blood demons you produce, I will crush them with my strength. Let's see if your blood demons are terrifying or if my emperor's suppression is crazy. The blood demons were undoubtedly very frightening and boundless. Even celestial gods would have a headache if they encountered them. However, this did not include Lu Feng. Lu Feng's existence was never afraid of anything. Even the endless blood devils could not shake him in the slightest. In terms of accumulation, Lu Feng was not afraid of anything. A fist soared through the air, killing countless people once again, causing the entire platform to tremble slightly. Undoubtedly, such an attack could be considered world-shaking. However, the sea of blood on the other side didn't wither in the slightest. It was still so majestic and filled with countless energy fluctuations. The 31st prince only had a cold expression on his face. He didn't need too much blood, devils. After all, he was the most outstanding genius of the epoch, and had accumulated a lot of power. Now that he had absorbed so much power, it was almost limitless. I have transformed into the underworld sovereign, a legendary supreme existence. Although my power cannot be said to be limitless, it is not a problem for me to continue. Emperor, I would like to see if you can really hold on. A sinister laugh was heard, causing people's hearts to tremble slightly. At this moment, some illusory creatures were suddenly born from the boundless sea of blood. They didn't have any physical form, but their presence was very obvious. A kind of death, abyss, and ruthless aura was transmitted from these illusory creatures, giving people an illusion of hell. That is the underworld ghost. The underworld ghost was a terrifying creature born from the underworld. It had a terrifying power that could devour everything. Wherever they appeared, it would cause a hellish scene, causing the world to end and all living creatures to sink into oblivion. If the blood devils are only low-level underworld creatures, then the underworld ghosts are high-level underworld creatures. This is no longer the blood devil world. The 31st prince is using the underworld blood race's bloody sea world. Seeing this bloody sea world, the ones who had the worst expression were not the humans, but the underworld race. They were the underworld race, a race of endless death. However, they controlled the world after death. The blood devils and the underworld ghosts were creatures born from the process of death. Their existence had nothing to do with the underworld race. The titled underworld race couldn't even control underworld creatures. This was undoubtedly an extremely ironic thing. The underworld race's underworld beasts are terrifying creatures born from the world of death. The blood devils and underworld ghosts of the underworld blood race, and even the top-level underworld dragon, are all envoys of death. To be honest, they both have their pros and cons. The underworld beasts were extremely powerful, even more terrifying than the underworld dragon. However, they were extremely rare in number. Even a stunning existence like the young underworld king could only produce hundreds of underworld beasts at his peak. However, the blood devils and underworld ghosts were endless, making people tremble. Therefore, to be honest, there was no absolute power. The appearance of the underworld ghosts undoubtedly proved that the 31st prince had already used the underworld blood race's bloody sea world to its peak. Everyone knew that if this continued, the emperor's power would be exhausted, and the 31st prince would win. This was the final result. However, some people didn't see it that way. These people were the unparalleled kings. The Tiandao crown prince sighed softly as he looked at the emperor, who was waving his fists in the boundless sea of blood. It seems like the 31st prince's soul still exists after becoming an underworld venerate, but he has gradually lost himself and sunk into the underworld venerate's world. He has already forgotten how shocking the emperor's existence is. The crown prince turned around and looked at the Tiandao crown prince with a look of approval. Indeed, wanting to rely on this to defeat the emperor is undoubtedly a kind of joke. I believe that the final collision is coming. Just as everyone thought that Lu Feng was really going to be completely lost, a dazzling brilliance suddenly appeared in the middle of the boundless sea of blood. This was a great brilliance of a sacred relic. As the brilliance shone, the entire era trembled. Gradually, the boundless brilliance covered everything, causing the entire world to tremble unceasingly. At this moment, many existences of the human race were boiling with excitement. It appeared. It really appeared. Ha 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 ha. 31st Prince, you have finally activated the most terrifying power of the Emperor. The boundless sea of blood, no matter how boundless it is, can it be compared to the universe? Can it be compared to an era? Seeing the madness of the young generation of the human race, many existences of the other races had a strange look in their eyes. In the next moment they finally thought of something. Legend has it that the Emperor had once condensed an invincible ultimate move, a move that could make the universe tremble. That's the ultimate killing move of an entire era. At this moment, when the shocking phenomenon appeared, these people understood that Lu Feng was finally going to use that invincible ultimate move, the ultimate move that could topple an era. In the distant space, a voice that shook the world resounded. The era of the Emperor. These 4 simple words represented the arrival of a new era. This is the ultimate move of an era. Countless people were dumbfounded, confused, terrified, and trembling. The era of the Emperor, that was the epoch that belonged to the Emperor. In his era, he was the only eternal and greatest existence. Other than the Emperor, all living beings had to submit and tremble, becoming the Emperor's subjects. This was the ultimate meaning of the era of the Emperor, the true spirit of the era of the Emperor. At this moment, many existences finally got to see the aura of a true supreme royal lord. In an instant, the bloody world that was so dense that it was solid and filled the endless void completely disappeared at this moment. No, it didn't disappear, it was completely suppressed, compressed, and only 1% of the original area was left. In the era of the Emperor, everything was completely suppressed and became a joke. This was the era of the Emperor. The endless sacred realm of the Emperor stood in the deepest region of the universe, rooted in the hearts of billions of living beings, blooming with endless brilliance, exuding eternal power. In the surrounding space, countless immortals and saints were worshipping, quietly waiting for the Supreme Emperor to appear in the center of the imperial city. Finally, after billions of waiting, the Supreme Emperor slowly walked out of the eternal picture from the depths of space and time. This was a great scene, a Supreme Emperor that made people tremble. His eyes were indifferent, the greatest eyes. In his eyes there was only the change of the era, only the change of time. In his eyes, the countless gods were insignificant existences. This was a true monarch, the greatest and most supreme monarch. Just like this, the Supreme Emperor looked indifferently at the constantly surging, terrifying demonic shadows in the distance. He took a step forward gently, and it was this step that made the world tremble again. Hundreds of millions of creatures shouted from the bottom of their hearts at this moment. Imperial Master Wushuang's momentum had reached its peak at this moment. At this moment, Lu Feng finally looked into the distance, where countless underworld venerables' envoys were gathered. In the next moment, Lu Feng raised his arm gently. In his mouth there was supreme majesty. Kill, it was a soft word, but it represented an infinite amount of determination to kill. In an instant, countless immortals and demons were stirred. They all stood up, bowed respectfully in the direction where Lu Feng was, and charged into the distance to kill. Endless dynasty. This was the true endless dynasty. Compared to the time in the Blood Sea, the terrifying power of this era was even more extreme and horrifying. In an instant, millions of immortals roared. They were soldiers, generals, pawns, and commanders. They forgot everything and charged into the distance with no regard for their lives. This is the era of emperors. With an era as the backing, the power of an era poured in everything. This is something the underworld venerables world can't compare to. Everyone finally understood why Lu Feng was so indifferent and fearless. In this massacre that had lasted for an entire epoch, everything was just a joke. How could mere blood demons and underworld venerables compete with the Supreme Dynasty? This was simply a joke, the biggest joke. Millions of immortal soldiers and generals had arrived in an instant. Blood demons couldn't compare to any of them. When they attacked, a part of space and time would be destroyed, and a region would sink into oblivion. In an instant, or perhaps even less than an instant, the world of the Blood Sea collapsed. Even though the boundless sea of blood was constantly providing power, the Supreme Dynasty was even more terrifying. There were millions, billions, billions, billions of living beings waiting there along with countless godfiends guarding it. As long as the Supreme Emperor gave the order, all of them would be killed in an instant, annihilating everything. Finally, the world of the Blood Sea collapsed. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.